Call this meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Anchorage Assembly, September 14, 2010. Madam Clerk, please do the roll call.
Ms. Drummond. Present. Mr. Birch.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Ms. Johnston. Here. Mr. Trainee.
Here.
Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Mr. Starr. Excused for the moment. Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Here.
Ms. Osiander. Here. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Osiander, could you lead us in the pledge, please, ma'am?
I pledge
We've been joined by Mr. Starr. The minutes reflect it. Hi, Mr. Starr. It's all right, sir. We have minutes of a previous meeting of August 17, 2010. Second.
Mr.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Osiander.
Once again, we've not gotten a hard copy. Could we please in the future have hard copies of the minutes?
Okay.
We'll take care of that. Thank you for pointing that out, ma'am.
What do you want me to say that?
Do you want to wait and pull this on the next one so you can read? Let's save it for a week, and we'll just bring it up for 2 weeks. Bring it up.
I'd
next
appreciate
time.
that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's not the end of the world.
It was
Go ahead.
apparently it was agreed while I was gone that certain members asked that they not be put in the packets because there was so much extra paper, every week after week. So we can start adding them again if people wish, but it was done at the request of.
I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll just postpone approving this item until the meeting of the 28th. Mayor's report, Mr. Mayor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I had the honor, along with the First Lady, to attend the rededication of the Firefighter Memorial, which is moved to Station 1, and the fact that the department did that on 9/11 was a very, very significant and touching event. What impressed me the most was the participation statewide from different fire departments who sent representatives, and what also impressed me was the incredible volunteer donations of both time and cash that both this community and other communities put into the effort to make it really a very, very special event and a very special place when it's completed. So people like Larry Partouche and people like Chip Brown and others that are active in the community really stepped up. And I can't remember the name of the Wasilla contractor, Chief, but there was a contractor from Wasilla that just really took this project by the horns and did an outstanding job. So it was an honor to be there, and it was a tremendous celebration.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Mayor.
the second thing is, tomorrow, of course, we'll be meeting with the Assembly at 1 o'clock to release the Viewpoint Learning results from the community dialogues that we held last month, and look forward to meeting with the body and discussing the results.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that. No questions for the Mayor from the Assembly, at least not indicating any. Next item would be Assembly Chair's report. Just want to tell you how much we appreciate everybody out there for Fill the Boot. I think LB, we raised, 103,000 plus? Not us, but everybody. I found out how hot those turnout uniforms are. Paul, did you find yours was hot, Mike?
Very hot.
How did you get one? I didn't get one.
You had to ask nice.
Or they didn't have one my size.
Well, you're kind of tiny. They didn't have one your size. Now, me, on the other hand, they tried to figure out what size would fit me. It was interesting. But I appreciate everybody that participated in it. We had a lot of good people coming through the intersection, and Elvie was working the intersections like crazy. When the cars piled up, she was getting money out of them.
And Mr. Chairman, I just left the doctor's office looking at my big toe. Thank you.
But it was good participating. And I want to thank everybody that contributed in those that were working, because it's amazing. We raised that much money. The money stays in Anchorage. So it's really good for the people that suffer with that terrible disease.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Debbie. You had your hand up, Debbie.
I'm sorry. It's not quite on this topic, sir. Do we have a meeting tomorrow? I heard the mayor, and I didn't have that on my calendar.
I'm told there's a meeting that's been set for tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I can't be there.
It may be difficult. Is it just an informal information, right? It's not a regular work session?
How is it listed?
I think we called it a work session. It's the community dialogue report. We sent an email out last week. Yeah.
I just was surprised because
Vice Chairman will
Send
be
email
there
out.
because I won't be there.
Okay.
And Mike?
I'm sorry. Can we get it through email then, if we can't?
Mr. Mayor, can you send us a copy email?
Yes, it'll be online and sent to all assembly members.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back on the topic of Fill the Boot, I just wanted to, the administration should take note that the intersection of Boniface and DeBar is so broken that people had time to wait in traffic to write me checks while we were filling the boot. I had a couple of people stuff checks in the boot, so you might want to take note of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It was interesting. One guy had change in his ashtray. So he dumped it in the boot, and he says, oh, by the way, you got lots of butts in there, too. So we not only got his change, we ended up with his butts. Apparently, he puts it all in the tray. But thank you guys for participating. It's really important we keep involved in these community activities. One last thing before I give up the time, and we'll go around for everybody. We have some scouts here. You want to come up and identify yourselves? Come on, guys. You wear a uniform, you're fair game. Come on down. Just tell us your name, what troop you're with, and what rank you are and what you're working on.
My name is Brendan Hayhurst. I'm with Troop 104. I'm a Star Scout, and I'm working on my citizenship in the community.
Who sponsors your pack, your troop?
I have no idea.
Where's it located?
It's located at SEAS, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton School.
Okay, good.
My name is Jason Hayhurst, and I am a second class, and I'm working on my citizenship in the community.
Well, welcome to this assembly meeting. If you have any questions when we take a break, just ask us about it, okay?
Okay.
It's good to see you here. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
My name is Joellen Walters. I am with Truth 56 in Eagle River, Alaska. I am a senior, and I am working on my Gold Award right now.
Good. Debbie likes that.
I like to see Girl Scouts, too.
Yep. Thanks for being here. Now we'll go around and get committee reports. Harriet, we'll start with you and work our way down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a committee report, but I do want to announce that the Spenard Road Hill unofficially opened on Friday night over the weekend. There are still road closed signs up there, but everybody who lives in the neighborhood knows it's okay to use. They're putting the finishing touches on it, and Construction Unlimited has done an amazing job. We had a little celebration at the bottom of the hill. We brought tents from the Spenard Farmers Market, a grill, we had burgers, people brought salads. It was just a blast. And it is gorgeous, and all weekend people were walking and biking and rolling and strolling and driving up and down that hill with big smiles on their faces. I'm telling you, this is a very welcome project in West Anchorage, and I'm happy to report that it's finished.
That's
Thanks.
great, Harriet. Yes, Chris.
See, the Chamber Board met last Friday, and among other things, we swore in a new president. Bill Evans will be president for the coming year, and that gavel pass happened at the Monday, Make It Monday Chamber Forum. And at that time, although he was not in attendance, I would like to recognize George Kalis, who was actually recognized for his engagement with the military and in so many committees for so long. George is actually a past chairman of the chamber.
Wasn't he?
So anyway, that was good on him, and we're off for another year. A lot of focus and interest in what we can do to make Anchorage a better place to do business. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chris. Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I want to remind the Audit Committee and the public of some of the Audit Committee's responsibilities, and two of them is to receive and review reports resulting from audits of municipal agencies, activities and accounts, and also to selectively review management action taken to implement audit recommendations contained in all reports of audits. And with that said, I just want to let you know, Mr. Chairman, I will be pulling the audit on the billings and collections for the Health and Human Services Department, because I believe that it needs to have a review and discussion at the Audit Committee level, and I've informed the administration already of what I plan to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Jennifer? Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real briefly, after many shifts and shuffles, we finally set our next Port Committee meeting for Thursday, October 14 at 9 a.m. in City Hall. And that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr, sir?
2 points of notice. One is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting scheduled for the 16th, which is this Thursday, has been canceled. We have also, as you may have known or seen from the future schedule, established the public hearing schedule for the budget review process once the administration submits it to us on the 1st. Based on our committee discussions, we felt prudent, and I supported it along with the chairman, of 3 public hearings to review the budget as opposed to the mandatory required 2. So you'll see the public opportunity to weigh in on the budget submitted will be three public hearings, and hopefully sometime early December we take formal action. Although, if you remember from our Honorable Mr. Teshi, we don't have a date certain to approve the budget now. We're supposed to basically, if we can't come to resolve, we just keep working at it until we do. So I'm appreciative for that latitude that Mr. Teshi thought prudent to weigh on us. And the final note of point of personal privilege is I'm honored to have my dad sitting in the back of the room. So for those that maybe just wave your hand.
Which one?
Yeah. So some of you that admire my skills, I hope you have a chance to meet my dad. You'll see where they come from. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Ernie?
No comment.
Paul?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Safety Committee was initially scheduled for last Wednesday, but postponed a week to make sure we incorporated some discussion on the PERF report from the Police Executive Research Forum, deployment study. We do have the document, had a chance to go over the first drafts, and everything looks in order, and look forward to having some discussion. Actually, a pretty action-packed hour meeting tomorrow. It's just ahead of the viewpoint budget dialogues. And so we're scheduled tomorrow at noon at the Assembly Conference Room, so the public's welcome, of course. Should have APDFD, Health and Human Services, EOC, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else pitching. I have to look at the agenda, but look forward to having everybody there. And for that, I think we're done.
Thank you. Mike?
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Debbie?
Next Title 21 committee is going to be held on Thursday, the 23rd, from 9:30 to 11:30 at the Planning Department Conference Room. We are continuing our final overview of the previously adopted chapters. We are about halfway through Chapter 2, and everyone's welcome to come.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we go on, I just wanted to thank the fire department. Last Sunday, one of my daughters was involved in an accident at, where was it, Boniface and Northern Lights. I think it was Station 11 that responded. She had 4 of her nephews with her, and I really appreciate the effort the fire department went through to make sure all 4 of them were fine. And my other daughter made sure they're in crash dummy car seats. I think they could be launched to the moon and not feel it. But I appreciate all the effort they made with the kids to make sure that they were fine, they weren't hurt, and they didn't have any problem going on. So thank you very much. If you relayed that to that fire station, but I think it was probably Station 11 that responded. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. When it's your grandkids, you get a little bit more emotional about it. Let's move down to the addendum to the agenda. I'll need a motion to incorporate.
So moved.
Second.
Let me go through the addendum to the agenda with you. Item 9A1, resolutions for action. This is Resolution AR 2010-266, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing September 25th, 2010 as a Safe Medicine Awareness and Disposal Day in Anchorage, in Alaska. That's from the mayor and all the Assembly members. Item 9D5, Assembly Memorandum AM 494, 2010, cooperative purchase to Network Business Systems, NBS, to furnish 2 NetApp storage systems to the municipality of Anchorage. Information Technology Department, $210,098 in purchasing. Item 9D6, the same memorandum, AM 495, 2010, recommendation of award to Interlock Solutions, Inc., to provide a computerized maintenance management system for the municipality of Anchorage Municipal Light and Power, MLNP, RFP 2010-P004, $795,000 purchasing. And item 9D7, Assembly Memorandum AM 497-2010, change order number 9 to purchase order number 231254 with Magellan Behavioral Health Inc. to provide employee assistance program services to the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska. Employee Relations Department, $83,477.35 purchasing. Under information and reports, there's item 9E1A, Information Memorandum AIM 97-2010A, Internal Audit Report 2010-08, Buildings and Collection Department, Department of Health and Human Services. Item 9F6, under Ordinances and Resolutions for Introduction, Resolution AR 2010-267, resolution accepting a grant of $2 million from Alaska Energy Authority and appropriating to the Solid Waste Disposal Utility Capital Improvements Fund 563 for development of a landfill gas to energy project at the Anchorage Regional Landfill by the Solid Waste Services Department. Public hearing on this is requested for 9/28/2010. There's an assembly memorandum that comes along with it, AM 496-2010. Under Old Business and Information, Unfinished Action on Public Hearing Items, it's item 11A1, Assembly Memorandum AM 471-2010A, sole source purchase to provide self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, and unit upgrades from Draeger for the municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Fire Department, AFD, it's $1,564,789.10 from purchasing. Item 11B2, Ordinance AO 2010-54S, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code 1.15.035 to provide additional restrictions on the employment of elected officials for 1 year after leaving municipal service. From Assembly members Gray, Jackson, Drummond, and Gutierrez. Item 9B3, Assembly Memorandum AM 498-2010. And on the back side, there is item 14M2, Ordinance AO 2010-58S, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, geographically expanding Assessment District 1SD97, also known as the Downtown Improvement District, as a special assessment district for services within the area of the downtown Anchorage established by Anchorage Ordinance AO 97, Anchorage Ordinance 9751 to include additional properties to the west as more specifically known in the attached map of the revised Special Assessment District 1S97, authorizing a district as expanded to continue to provide public improvement services, establishing the basis and method of assessing, allocating and appropriating the costs of services, and the rules and procedures for the assessment calculations, billings, penalties, interest, costs, application of payments, and enforcement of assessments. Well, that's being brought forward by me. Yes, ma'am. I missed a number? Okay. Let's see. This is on item 11A1. She said I missed the amount. It's $1,543,789.10. I missed the 10 cents, huh? Oh, well. Thank you, ma'am. Is there anything that needs added to the addendum?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
It was my understanding that the administration was going to present the police deployment study as an information item, and I haven't seen that other than the hard copy that I got in my mail.
Mr. Mayor?
I'd like to know what the intent is.
No, it's not an information item. It was not designed to be presented to the Assembly for acceptance. It's an internal working document that we're using for management purposes, and we certainly obviously shared it with everyone, including the public.
Okay, does everybody have a copy of this one? Yes. Okay, I've got an item 9D8 that we need to add. It's AM 499, 2010. Subject is proprietary purchase to Sears. Okay, whatever. I could spell it out to you. Siri Dysix to furnish a temporary message system to the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska Municipal Library. AML, it's $35,159. Could you find a different name for this? Does everybody have a copy of this? Okay. So that's added to our addendum to the agenda. And I also have something we need to add, and this came from the Department of Law. And this is a corrected assessment roll attached to AR 2010-251, totals $790,916.25. Dennis, is it a floor amendment? Do we need to add it? This came from you.
I'm sorry?
Do we need to add it in there, or just a floor amendment? We can bring it up at any time.
Well, the question was whether or not we could make the floor amendments before the main motion to approve the roll. We wanted to get the corrected roll out there to the public, and we've posted it online through the clerk's office public notice page. So my thought was, if you moved the main motion at the beginning of the public hearing, but put everybody on notice that you wouldn't take final action until the end of the 28th, at that time you could move these floor amendments.
Okay. Then I'll just let that go.
That might be the easiest way to do it, I guess. That would put the correct roll out there that much faster.
We'll just let it go for now, Dennis. So is there anything else added to the addendum to the agenda? Not seeing anything.
Mr. Chairman.
Any objection to the addendum?
Mr. Chairman, one more item.
Go ahead,
Apologies.
Dennis.
We have the municipal manager's report for the Downtown Improvement District. It's agenda item 14M. It's an AIM that would go with the AO and the AM.
Was that handed out?
It's a new document that we brought with us tonight. If you want, we can hand it out and add that to that agenda item.
Let's see it. No, you can't normally add anything to the 14s, but I'd like to see what they're bringing forward to us. Yeah. Let's see what this is. Usually doesn't happen. Gonna be a fun night. I don't think it needs added to the agenda. It's just another item. You could put it in as an informational item. Yeah. The document that you just got out, let's make it 9E2 on the addendum to the agenda. And what this is informational memorandum 100-2010 from the municipal manager, subject report and recommendation, AO 2010-58S, Downtown Improvement District Special Assessment District, 1SD 97. So that will be on the addendum to the agenda as item 9E2. Is there any objection to the addendum to the agenda? If not, we've approved that addition to our document in front of us. I now need a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Okay. Now let's go for those people who want to pull things for a little bit further discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I hate to muddy the water, but I already have a 9 Echo 2
So do I, Mr. Chairman.
in the consent agenda.
9 Echo 2 is labeled 14M.
No, I have a 9 Echo 2 that is an assembly information memorandum.
Yep, you're right.
98-2010.
We'll make it 9E3.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It happens. Huh? Mike, which one's 9E2? Because
No.
the clerk doesn't have it.
AIM 98-2010.
Yep.
We were looking on the addendum. Thank you, Mike, as ever. You were on track.
Got to give Mr. Holloman credit for that catch, Mr. Chairman.
Just an assist.
It sounds like it. Okay, let's go for those things that need to be pulled on the consent agenda for a little further discussion. Debbie, we'll start on your end.
Ray Jackson is pulling that information report. I don't need to.
Okay. Mike?
I will pull 9 Alpha 1 and 9 Delta 4. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Delta 4.
Thank you, sir. Paul?
Nothing at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ernie?
Nothing.
Bill?
No items.
Didn't you pull something for your dad so he can see you? Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pull item 9, Echo 3, please.
Now, for those that don't know, 9 Echo 3 might happen to be the item that we were just discussing. Thanks, Pat.
Okay.
Jennifer?
No, thank you.
Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the addendum, I'd like to pull 9 Apple, 9E, let me start all over again. 9E1A. And for those of you who haven't figured out what the difference is, because it took me a minute to do so, it's just fixing, the A version is just fixing a typo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Chris?
No items.
Sorry, doing some paperwork. Harriet?
No items, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Administration? I didn't forget about him.
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. Nothing else to add to it. Let's just vote on the balance of the consent agenda. I'm going to bring it up. Please vote on the balance of the consent agenda.
Mr. Jackson?
I'm going to go back. Great.
That was approved unanimously, with the exception of those items that were pulled for a little further discussion. Now, was anybody appointed to a board or commission?
We do have several, Mr. Chair.
If you want to, Mr. Mayor, if you want to bring them forward, and
Anyone who was appointed, please
appreciate
come up to the mic and tell the body what you were appointed to and who you are.
if you would, please. We appreciate you agreeing to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Gail Mathieson, and I'm honored to serve on the Anchorage Sister Cities Commission, and thank you.
Good.
Hello, I'm Dr. Regina Chenault, and I've been appointed to the Mayor's Advisory Board for EMS, and I'm honored to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Robert Stewart, and I'm appointed to the Sister Cities Commission.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the administration for making it possible for people to volunteer for these organizations. It's really good. Debbie, we're not letting you get replaced that quickly, ma'am. That ain't happening. Let's go to those items for a little further discussion. The first one is item 9A1.
Move to approve.
Second.
This is the Safe Medicine Awareness and Disposal Day. Is there any objection to approval of this item? Seeing none, that item is approved.
Mr. Chairman,
You
I'm
reading it,
presenting.
Mike?
I'm not sure who's reading.
I'll read it.
Pat's reading it.
Come on down, folks.
Come on down. If you got cameras, want to take a picture, just come on down so you can point them that way.
This is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing September 25, 2010 as Safe Medicine Awareness and Disposal Day in Alaska. Whereas the abundance of medications in our medicine cabinets can sometimes lead to dangerous drug interactions and overdoses, and whereas prescription drugs are a major source of accidental child poisonings, and whereas studies show that prescription drugs are making their way into our waterways and water tables due to human activities such as flushing or throwing medications into the trash, And whereas 1 in 5 teenagers abuse prescription drugs and are accessing them from their home medicine cabinets, and whereas the Alaska Safe Medicine Alliance, whose partners include the Seniors Behavioral Health Coalition, Aquila Incorporated, the Alaska State Troopers, the Matanuska-Susitna Borough, the Alaska National Guard Counter-Drug Program, the Alaska Pharmacists Association, the Red Ribbon Coalition, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, Association for the Advancement of Retired Persons, the United Way of Alaska, Fred Meyers, the Assisted Living Home Association, the Anchorage Police Department, the Alaska Native Medical Center, My Doctor's Pharmacy, Soldotna Professional Pharmacy, the Anchorage Native Medical Center, the Anchorage Senior Citizens Advisory Commission, and others who have partnered with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration for a National Prescription Drug Safe Disposal Initiative on September 25, 2010, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at locations throughout the state of Alaska. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly resolves that the Anchorage Assembly recognizes September 25, 2010 as Safe Medicine Awareness and Disposal Day in Alaska. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this fine day.
If I may, I just wanted to thank the Assembly for adopting that resolution on behalf of the seniors, the youth, and the environment. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I wonder how many of us have pills at our house that we've gotten over the years, and we haven't taken care of them. I know Sandy was going through her medicine cabinet this weekend. It surprised me how many she had to dispose of, because they were, well, being military, they give Motrin out, I think, by the dump truck full. It's standard medicine over there.
Mr. Chairman, I had went on for the comment. I just wanted to thank the Alliance for doing this. In some communities, I'm aware of the National Citizen Police Academy Association. It takes a great concentrated effort of volunteers to do what they call pill drops, and they have designated locations where you can do just this. And I'm just glad that we've got an agency that will do this.
Elby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank whoever was responsible for bringing this forward, because I just think it's really great to know and to see in black and white what you need to do and where to take old prescriptions. So thank you very much for this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We think if everybody flushed them down the toilet, which a lot of people do, they're right about the water. I mean, it impacts the water, so they need to be carefully disposed of. And there are a lot of different medicines that people take for various reasons. And the problem is if your children or grandchildren find them, and they might think, hey, that's a pretty color. That's not necessarily what you want to ever have happen to your family. So I appreciate this. Okay, moving on down. We're now down to item E3. Actually, D. We're on D. Sorry. This is Delta 4.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. This is SIM Memorandum AM 490, 2010.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question to the administration. What is the nature of this relocation? What are we moving and where are we moving it to?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gutierrez, these are underground electrical lines that were encountered, and we're just relocating them so it's out of the area in conflict with the road construction that we have.
So these are lines that are already underground, then?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I beg your indulgence for a moment. The reason I ask is when this body passed an undergrounding ordinance several years ago, as you will recall, having been on the body at that time,
I remember.
One of the things that was supposed to happen was an annual plan for undergrounding utilities around town, and I've been asking for that plan since I've been a member of this body. Actually, haven't made that request. I should come of this administration yet. I'm hoping that I have a better chance of receiving that plan actually from this administration than I had from the last. But I would like to see that plan at some point before I die. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're getting to sound like friends of mine. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'll let them stay anonymous. Is there any other comments on this item? Is there any opposition to the approval of this item? Not seeing any of that. Item is approved. If you could get Mr. Gutierrez a listing of the undergrounding, because a few years ago that was, and Mr. Mayor, you were on the assembly with this when that was passed. And that was a hot subject, is who was going to pay for it, how it was going to get paid, and whenever it would be done.
Yeah, no problem, Mr. Chairman. MLMP, Chugach, all of them have a plan annually that they develop, and we'll gladly get that to Mr. Gutierrez.
Like I said, if we can get a copy of that, we'd really appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Thank you. Next item in front of us is going to be item 9E, E1A. Hopefully I got the right one, Elvie. It's off the addendum to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to accept.
Second.
Elvie, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, as mentioned earlier during committee reports, I would like to postpone accepting this AM until the audit committee has a meeting, and I would ask the clerk if she would not mind scheduling an audit committee meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Clerk?
We can schedule what time? I'm trying to add a new item. It wasn't in the system. So, when would you like the audit meeting?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is postpone acceptances. Yes, Debbie?
Thank Ms. Gray Jackson for pulling this, and I would also appreciate some examination of potentially contracting out this billing the way that we do for emergency medical service. It might be a good way to get a little more efficient with the revenue.
Through the chair, we'll talk about that at the audit committee meeting. Thank you, Ms. Osiander.
Pete, you guys did the audit of this, right? Do you have anything to add to this before we postpone it? Okay, this item will come up to us after the audit committee meets, so it should be by our next meeting. It'll be back in front of us. Is there any objection to postponing this item? I'm not seeing any objection. That's done, Elvie. Thank you for bringing it forward, ma'am. Appreciate it. Let's see. We're down to item 9E3. This is AM 100 don't even have a copy of it.
Move to approve.
I'll move to
100-2010.
Move to accept.
Second.
Right, that stuff.
Go ahead, Pat.
Mr. Chairman, I would just move that this item be linked to item 14M on the agenda for our next meeting on September 28th, just so all the information is available in one place for anybody who's interested.
Second.
Is there any objection to that? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please make sure that happens. Appreciate it. Well, that's fun. That completes those items were pulled for a little further discussion.
We can do item
11A and B. Next item in front of us is old business. It's item 11A. Some history on this one. This is AM 471, 2010, sole source purchase to provide self-contained breathing apparatus. Unit upgrades, it's $1,543,789.10. Postponed from 8/31/2010, no motion pending. Debbie, I think you pulled this at the time.
Yeah, I'd like to move the A version.
Second.
And I want to thank the administration of the fire department for working with me to get some answers.
What?
The main difference is this one specifically does not include the Girdwood and Chugach service area. So urge approval.
Jennifer?
My understanding as far as the Girdwood or Eagle River could still participate if they wanted to. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, and they have 2 years in which to be able to exercise that purchase on this contract.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any objection to approval of this item? Not seeing any. Thanks, Debbie, for bringing that forward. Appreciate it. And taking the diligence you need to be ready to vote on this. Thank you. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 11B. This is ordinance AO 2010-54. Amends AMC 1.15.035 to provide additional restrictions on the employment of elected officials for 1 year after leaving municipal service. Public hearing was closed 8/17/2010. Ms. Gray Jackson moved to approve. Second by Mr. Gutierrez. Motion to approve is on the floor.
Mr. Chairman,
Ray Jackson.
I'd like to move to approve a substitute version of 2010-54.
Second.
Third.
And I just want to talk a little bit about why I brought this forward, okay? And it's real simple, folks. It's about public trust, integrity, and ethics. That's it. That's all. It affected the school board members also, and we had a discussion on this subject at the last joint work session between the Assembly and the school board members. At the last meeting, there was some housekeeping that needed to occur because the way the current ordinance, even before this was introduced, read, an elected official that left one office could not run for another office. But this S version basically makes it very clear that this does not affect or prohibit an elected official from being elected to another office after leaving one elected office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Comments from Assembly members? Debbie?
I basically have no objection to the rationale for doing this, but I do have objection to some of the wording. I'd like to draw to your attention to specifically line 20 on the S version, which removes the words "but does not." Basically, existing code says that an elected official cannot represent, advise, or assist a person if there was a matter that was under consideration during our term of office, but it does not preclude us from dealing with something new. With this change, we will be so precluded, so that, for instance, if when I'm off the Assembly, there is a request from a business in my district or a group of people in my neighborhood to try to help them do something to change the charter or to institute a new law, I could not, I guess, receive any kind of a stipend or help for doing that. And I don't really, I guess, see why that change is being proposed. Then on Section A, which is lines 26 through 32, it talks about a prohibition from, well, actually not a prohibition, but an allowance for hiring back or contracting with a former elected official, but only under some very particular situations. Basically, as I read this, it has to be a competitive bid, which means it has to be a request for proposal or an invitation to bid. Those documents have to be written, I think, fairly carefully to ensure that everything you want done is specified in the request for proposal. And potentially, once that is done, if you don't include something, you can run into problems. And you can also run into problems if you change your mind and you don't want to keep the person in that position after you hired them for the request for proposal, under the request for proposal. Basically now, both the mayor and the Assembly, through its chairman, have the ability to hire at-will employees, which means that as we see a job come up and we know somebody that we want, we can hire them for that. This would preclude us from doing that if the person has been in elected office for the past year, and instead would require this new process to be in place. It seems to me it places undue restrictions when there isn't necessarily a cause or need for such restrictions to be in place. Another example would be if, say, Mr. Starr decides not to run again, and I want to use part of my addendum to ask him to help me keep a closer eye on the budget. I would basically have to go to the purchasing office and get a request for proposal, and then also have somehow published by I guess, the purchasing officer that the integrity of the public solicitation process has not been adversely affected. And I'm not quite sure how that could even be done, frankly. On the section that's been changed on page 2, it talks about, it differentiates between school board members and people who have served as an assembly member. I do note that there are other elected officials that are not mentioned here, so I'm a little bit unsure of the intent. If someone has been elected to a limited road service board, for instance, if they are also precluded or not, but I would assume that they have to go through what's listed on number 26 through 32. On line 26 through 32. Anyway, I'm sorry, on page 2. So as I understand this, it says that since I'm an assembly member and I leave office, I could not be hired 9 months after I leave office as a secretary for my road board, for instance. And Dr. Selcraig, who's a planner, could not be hired by the planning department for a year. However, the president of the school board could be hired. I think that this puts some limitations, overly cumbersome limitations, on a problem that I don't see really exists, frankly. And I don't think that it necessarily is going to achieve the goal that's been publicly stated. So
You'll be a no vote?
I'm probably going to be a no vote, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have some answers to maybe some of your questions. Julia?
Thank you.
Through the chair, concerning the first comment, Dennis Wheeler and I had discussed that earlier today, he had the same question, and he phrased it as to whether the wording in lines 21 on down, if that if that's completely separate from the entire paragraph, and it's not. So the interpretation is this, that first we are talking, as Mrs. Osiander mentioned, about compensation. So it doesn't preclude people from coming, prior elected officials from coming before or doing basically what my profession calls pro bono work, but volunteer work and coming in. So the target is to be making money in that first year. The second change in changing it, but does not, to and if to when, in the ordinance as it is currently written, there were two levels of assembly consideration of matters. And one was if it was specific consideration, and the other level was of general consideration, but they did consider it. And so the example that Mr. Wheeler presented to me today was if somebody had worked on, if the Assembly was considering Title 21 revisions, and then somebody came in with a brand-new revision to Title 21 within that project that hadn't yet come in front of the Assembly, would they be precluded from that for money? And the answer is yes, if they're compensated, because the whole project is still the Title 21 project. But I believe the example that Ms. Osiander gave would not be included. I wasn't sure exactly of her example, but if the Assembly voted on an ordinance, just generally, not a singular application, but the rewrite of an ordinance was in front of the Assembly, then for 1 year after that, a person who served on the Assembly could not represent for money somebody wanting to change that ordinance again or amend it
in an application from them, but it wouldn't preclude somebody representing the assembly on just something because it was a regulation and or an ordinance. It was some municipal law thing that wasn't in front of the assembly, that no change was made by the assembly in the prior year, then there's no preclusion, even under this amendment.
Thank you, Julia. Harriet, on the issue in front of us?
Not on that particular issue, Mr. Chair, on the second page, but I'll wait if Ms. Tucker has additional.
Is that all, Julia? Julia, is that all?
That's all I understood.
Okay, thank you. Harriet?
Okay. On page 2, line 6, Ms. Osiander questioned whether she could be compensated or hired as the secretary or elected as the secretary of her road board. Are road board members compensated? Because this says on line 6, shall hold no compensated municipal employment.
Could I respond?
Go ahead, Debbie.
No, I said hired as a secretary. I also want to clarify later on a response for Ms. Tucker's comment.
Okay. Harriet? Do we move on?
Yeah.
Elby's. Elby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please, Ms. Osiander, correct me if I heard it wrong, but I thought one of your concerns, too, in paragraph 2 on page 2 was that you thought or believe that school board members are excluded from this ordinance in terms of having employment after before 1 year after leaving office, but this includes school board members also.
Could I clarify?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Debbie, you're next, ma'am.
Thank you. No, I know it says that. It says that the school board member can't be hired by the school board, but the president of the school board could be hired by the city the day after he leaves office, because it's only prohibition for serving with the school district. As I could be hired the day after I leave office to be, I think the position Carol offered me was noon duty, but I'd go higher than that. I'd go for assistant superintendent. Anyway, I could be hired then.
I was going to get to be road guard, and I didn't understand what she meant by that. Something about standing in the way of cars?
Right.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Could I respond then to the first one now,
Go ahead,
or do you want
ma'am.
me to do it later? No. Maybe a better example in the first one is we've talked about sales tax off and on. My understanding from the reading of this is that if a group decides that they want to start an initiative petition to institute a sales tax, and they wanted to hire me to help them, write it or advise on it, I could not do that because there's been a sales tax discussed while I've been in this office. That's how I read this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess more than anything, I keep going back to another branch of government at the state level where there's been some recent scrutiny on some employment at the state level by two legislators who, whether or not they quit before they got the job offers or whatever. And at the local level, I think, I go back to the level of, I guess, what was discussed in the public trust, and I think that it's very paramount that in today's times that we try to do what we can, best we can as a body to do good public process when we're enacting ordinances. And I think this one, though it may not be, I guess, as we've discussed in previous ordinances and actions, may not be the best writing or revision of it, but I would think that we could revisit the ordinance if necessary to address any housekeeping or other, I guess, adjustments as necessary. So I'd be in support of it.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to chime in and address a concern that Ms. Osiander raised. As I read this, you couldn't go to work for the school board. You could not. And I think there are good reasons for that. As it says, for 1 year, an assembly member for 1 year after leaving service shall hold no compensated municipal employment within the municipality except as an elected official. That would include being a noon duty person for the school district. Now, I think there's a very good reason for that. I think And you also highlighted the disparity that, for example, the person leaving the school board could come to work for the city. As an assembly member, you and I have the ability to affect policy decisions both for the city and for the school district, and then are potentially in a position to benefit from those policy decisions. Therefore, it makes sense to me that we should be excluded from positions that might allow us to benefit from such decisions. A school board member doesn't have the ability, say, to influence policy in the Department of Health or street maintenance or traffic. So to preclude them from coming to work for the municipality doesn't seem to be as big an issue to me. They would not have the ability to benefit at this level from decisions that they made at that level. So I think that's why there is a disparity there, and it seems to make sense to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess Mr. Kaltenbach's here. Sir, could you answer the question that Ms. Osiander sort of posed? On page 1, following the word, on line 30, following the word bid, it reads, and the purchasing officer determines in writing for publication by the municipal clerk the integrity of the public solicitation process has not been adversely affected. That ends on line 32. Do you have a mechanism you feel you could employ to do that? Yeah. Yes, you're the guy, right?
Speak into your microphone. Make sure your light's on. It's the green one.
I apologize. I didn't realize at the beginning that you had addressed the question to me. I didn't hear it. Do I have the means to say that the process has or has not been adversely affected? With an invitation to bid, I definitely have that capability. It is my call. Mm-hmm. With the request for proposal process, a portion of that process is outside my office, and that is the evaluation of proposals. That is done by committee. It is done in private, and I have no influence on that other than to ensure that the evaluation is submitted properly and scored properly after the fact. Okay. So I have some influence, but not total.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kaltenbach. I appreciate that explanation. Given that, I guess, Ms. Osiander, would it make you more comfortable and perhaps not resolve all your concerns if we deleted that section? And Ms. Gray Jackson, I guess I'd ask you if you would feel the ordinance would be irrevocably weakened by that deletion. Whichever wants to answer first.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
Elby, it's your ordinance.
Anyway, delete how much of that section?
Just starting on line 30, beginning with the word "and" through line 32.
Competitively bid?
It would still be competitively bid, but,
okay.
but the certification process starting after the word bid.
It would not be a certification process.
Right. I have no problem as long as the contract is competitively bid.
Okay. Well, in that case, Mr. Chairman, unless someone has, I'll make that motion to delete. I'll restate it just so the clerk has it. Starting on page 1, line 30, following the word bid, delete the words "and" through line 32 affected.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Who moved and seconded on that particular amendment? Discussion from Assembly members.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Mr. Flynn recommending this change because when you think about it, the bottom line is that's the purchasing officer's responsibility anyway. So I feel real comfortable deleting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no heartburn deleting it, but I want to ask Mr. Kaltenbach a question. I think maybe I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but you're our expert. I think you kind of have a grasp of what we were trying to accomplish with that language, and you said with the invitation to bid process, that's clearly up your alley. You've got a good handle on that. If you understand where we were trying to go with that language, short of deleting it, which I don't have any heartburn with, would you make any suggestions? How would you get where we're trying to go? I'm sorry. I know. Not a question you were expecting.
No answer is appropriate response, sir.
It does say competitively bid. Under the competitively invitation to bid process, again, I do have the capability of doing that. Earlier in the language, it does talk about bid or proposal, I believe, and that is where I have a little bit of a rub. So as long as that says competitively invitation to bid, that only covers half of our processes, and normally under professional services, we do use the request for proposal process. So I'm not sure where we want to go with this, but if you just enter the words competitively invitation to bid, I can do what you've asked. I can basically state that the process has not been adversely affected by the administration or anyone else, to my knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was the only question I had. I have no angst over deleting that language. I think we've been fortunate not only to have tremendous experience in that particular department over the last several years, but also a great deal of integrity, and I think that we can rely on that. So I have no heartburn with deleting that language.
Is there any objection to approval of this amendment that Mr. Flynn has given us? Seeing none, that's unanimous on that. We're now back to the main motion. With the amendment that we've, on line 30, after bid, we have a period. Any other discussion from assembly members on the ordinance, the original ordinance? Mr. Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to speak to two things briefly, if I might. As to paragraph 2 on the second page regarding the assembly member's ability to work for the school district, it's my understanding that it is, in fact, the sponsor's intent that that provision be more restrictive, such that municipal employment in that scenario includes an assembly member attempting to work for the school district. So I just want to make sure that that was, in fact, on the record as the intended interpretation of that provision, so it's clear to anybody reading the code later on down the line. There was some talk about possibly adding in, including the school district, as a phrase in that sentence, which could be done as well.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
The second point I have is on page 1, the first paragraph.
But it would help make it clearer.
I didn't read it. The first sentence speaks to the ability of an elected official to provide services for compensation regarding a matter that was under consideration during the elected official's period of service. The way this is set up, that would, and because it includes any general matter as discussed in the second sentence, I would echo Ms. Osiander's point that this would include all sorts of things, and I would presume it would include, but maybe the sponsors can speak to this, I would presume that it includes, Mr. Chairman, your service back in the 90s, because it doesn't distinguish in any way that period described in here during the elected official's period of service. So as I read this, any matter that comes up that you worked on in any previous period of service could be a prohibition in that first year after you leave the assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Ms. Gray Jackson, ma'am. Then we need to get on.
Thank you,
voting on this
Mr.
issue.
Chairman. Right, I agree with you. And thank you, Mr. Wheeler, for expressing my intent, which I failed to do on that one particular issue. Are you referring to paragraph 1, lines 15 through 18?
Through the chair, Ms. Gray Jackson, yes.
Okay, well, that is what is already existent in the code. That's not a change. I mean, that's already what's in the code.
Through the chair, Ms. Gray Jackson, I understand. It's because the amendment in the second sentence below that expands the issue of matter. What is a matter? The change in the ordinance pulls into it consideration of ordinances, resolutions, charter amendments, and other legislative measures. So it's much broader than previous. So it would cover a much longer and larger range of issues.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask our attorney to respond to Mr. Wheeler's concerns on my behalf, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Julia?
Through the chair, Mr. Wheeler's correct. And so if Mr. Mr. Wheeler's correct, because in the current code, there wasn't a limitation in that first sentence, because if it was ever specifically worked on, you know, even if a person had 9 years, if they ever worked on it, a specific matter, they wouldn't be able to work on it for compensation within a year. If it was a more general matter, there was no reason to track it because it wasn't covered. So in other circumstances, you could, it wouldn't be unreasonable to look at that and have it be during the elected officials' most immediate term of service or something, so that we wouldn't run into the situation as Mr. Wheeler has just pointed out, where somebody has served, like our chair, over more than 1 decade in different intervals.
You're keeping it very kind, Julia. Thank you. More than 1 decade.
Ready?
Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then we're going to bring up the vote on this.
Okay, I'm going to be really, really quick and fix this, okay? Because my intent in bringing forward this ordinance is twofold. First off, to prohibit any elected official from having a compensated job for at least a year after they leave office. And second is, if you get a contract, that it should go through the competitive bid process. Those two issues are taken care of in other paragraphs. So I have no problem if somebody would like to make an amendment to fixing Mr. Wheeler's concerns and Ms. Osiander's concerns in the first paragraph, because I don't believe that it will change what my intent is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Starr, sir. And I want to get this up to a vote relatively fast.
I just disagree with the concept. I can perhaps agree with the contracted nature of the intent here, but, you know, quite frankly, you know, there may be a reason why Mr. Honeman would be the best chief of police after he doesn't do this job anymore, and Patrick Flynn may be the best employee for the port director.
God help us.
I think it reaches out too far in prohibitive nature, and I think inadvertently we're going to discourage people from getting into the public's process through an elected official. I think when your time is up, you should be unencumbered. That said, there is some validity to perhaps schmoozing out a specific contract as there may be a public perception that, hey, we're going to put you in charge of rotating the tires or something for municipality, and here's a good smooth contract, and you're the guy for that. Yeah, I think something like that should be competitively bid. But now they're tied together, and a year is a long time. It may be that we preclude that, or we start to force, people that are really qualified to do work in the public sector to not run for elected office because it compromises their schedule. I think it's too broad-reaching. The other thing is I also believe the competitive bid nature opens us up to people that don't live and reside in Alaska, and that's always problematic for me when you have very finite requirements, such as the Title 21 rewrite. So I'm going to be a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's bring this up for a vote. Please vote. Yes will approve it, and no will not. We need one more person to vote. Okay. That is approved 6-5. As amended. We're now down to item 14A. We're going to put off our dinner break until 6:30 because that's when it's being delivered. So we're going to go on. We're at item 14A now, under new public hearings. It's ordinance AO 2010-15, an ordinance of the municipality of Anchorage authorizing and providing for the borrowing of not to exceed $297,296 from State of Alaska Clean Water Fund for the purpose of financing a portion of the cost of landfill capital improvement project at the Anchorage Regional Landfill, providing for related matters. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the clerk. Please spell your last name, because sometimes spelling's a little different. So would you please come forward and testify and spell your last name? Thank you. Anybody wishing to testify? Anybody all at hearings say no in public hearings? Close. What's the wish of the body?
Second, if I can.
Discussion from assembly members? Report director, huh? Please vote. That's going to start a new ruin.
Mr. Honeman, Mr. Birch.
We need all 11 in, please.
Mr. That's, yeah.
Thank you, Fred. Get better.
Mr. Honeman?
Okay. Just close it. That's approved by the body?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am?
I would like to go back and move notice of reconsideration of ordinance 2010-54.
Okay.
Thank you. I need a second.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
She's moving reconsideration.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would urge a no vote.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, please vote.
Forgive me, Mr. Chairman, reconsideration of?
Of the last ordinance that we passed, the one dealing with employment after you
And
leave
I'd urge a
elective
no
office.
vote. Thank you.
Could I speak to it?
If you want, ma'am. We've got a lot of people voted already, but go ahead,
All right.
Debbie.
Well, it's your call, sir, if I could speak
Go
to
ahead,
that.
Debbie.
I just think that it's unnecessary, particularly when we don't quite know what we're doing here, folks. I don't plan to do any reconsideration motion, but I think you're slamming the door on something that you're still trying to understand the impact of as you read it. So I'm going to vote yes, not because I intend to reconsider, but because I don't think the door needs to be closed entirely tightly on this one yet.
Thank you, Debbie. Please finish voting. We should have one more there. That item will not be considered by the body. We're now down to item 14B, Ordinance AO 2010-60, Ordinance of the Municipal Assembly. Excuse me, Ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing the borrowing and accepting from State of Alaska Drinking Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $19,297,300.
Waive reading.
For the purpose, and this is the AWW 2010 Capital Improvement Budget, CP Water Improvement Projects. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing this item is closed. What's the wish of the body? Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in a second. A discussion from assembly members. Seeing none, please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14C. This is ordinance AO 2010-62, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing the borrowing and accepting from State of Alaska Clean Water Fund aggregate amount not to exceed $10,638,447 for the purpose, and this is the AWW 2010 Capital Improvement Budget. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing and say none. Public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Discussion from assembly members. Please queue in. Doesn't appear to be any. Please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14D. Resolution AR 2010-249, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $636,363 from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Edward Blythe Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, and appropriating $27,208 from the Anchorage Metropolitan Police Service Fund Area 151, Anchorage Police Department. This is underwriting projects to reduce crime and improve public safety. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing is open. Public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Discussion from assembly members. Please vote. The item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14E, Resolution AR 2010-250, resolution appropriating $275,000 from the Ben Boeke Ice Arena. This is for renovation being performed on the Ben Boeke and Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Ms. Osiander, ma'am.
To the administration, I know that the Anchorage School District football teams are not using the football stadium, and the bleachers are in some disarray. As I understand it, this does not cover that problem. Is that correct?
Has nothing to do with Ben Boeke.
That's correct.
Are there plans to fix that problem with the Anchorage football stadium?
Yes, there are, but that's a different issue altogether.
Okay.
This right here is to actually go in there and replace some pipes within the facility that were so corroded. The pipes were this big initially, and they were closed down to like this. And then the other thing is we had to replace a major air handling unit and also a heating unit.
Okay, well,
so that's what this is specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Vaqueros. I'm certainly for this one, but if you could fill us in on the football stadium, maybe in an email or some later date, because I've had several people contact me. I'm sure other people have too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion from assembly members? Not seeing any. Please vote.
Ms. Drummond?
That item is approved unanimously by the body. I'm sure we just made a lot of kids in Anchorage that play hockey very happy.
What about those football players, Mr. Chairman?
Well, we won't deal with them right now, but at least the hockey kids that go there will be happy. There's a lot of kids that play hockey. Item in front of us now is item 14F, Resolution AR 2010-253. Resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $1,034,137 when tendered from State of Alaska Department of Health and Human Social Services and $270,000 from the 2010 General Government Operating Budget. This is for Human Services Community Matching Grant Program. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, and public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body? Been moved and seconded. In discussion from assembly members. Please vote. The item was approved unanimously. Next item in front of us is item 14G, Ordinance AO 2010-63, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 15.20.020 regarding abatement of illegal campsites as public nuisance. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Jeff, did I need to invite you?
I didn't want to hog the time, Mr. Chair. Jeffrey Mittman, M-I-T-T-M-A-N. I thank the Chair and the Assembly for the opportunity to briefly testify on behalf of the ACLU of Alaska. I believe you received the written testimony I had previously submitted by email. Rather than reiterate what was in that testimony, I'd just like to go back a year. About a year ago, when this first ordinance was introduced, the ACLU of Alaska reached out to then Assembly Member Dan Coffey, and we had incredibly productive discussions with him on finding an ordinance that met the needs of the municipality of Anchorage and the police department in dealing with a perceived public nuisance, and also we felt would comply with constitutional requirements. At that time, we pointed out to Assemblymember Coffey that every other municipality in the United States that dealt with this issue stored the public property of individuals. Campsites were abated. That's constitutionally required. You can't just deprive individuals of their property. Assemblymember Coffey pointed out to us that the municipality just simply didn't have the real estate or the funds to store public goods. Based on that, we came up with a compromise. It was never the intention of the ACLU to try to dictate or coordinate public policy and say 5 days is reasonable, 10 days is reasonable, 15. That's not our area of expertise. Our expertise is in what's constitutionally required. What we worked out with Assemblymember Coffey was a position that we stated we would not object to. We did not feel that 15 days we could reasonably go to a court and say it is not appropriate for the municipality after a 15-day period to deem property abandoned. It's not a preference, but we certainly wouldn't go to court over that. Based on that, we came up with a compromise solution, which was what was going forward at that time. For some reason, that got sidetracked. We're back in the same position now. The court has ruled and agreed with us on all our constitutional infirmities. Those have been addressed by the Assembly, and I want to thank the mayor and the municipality for submitting an ordinance that we feel is, in most part, constitutionally appropriate. The one remaining issue is this idea of throwing out or deeming property abandoned. It's just not constitutionally acceptable. What I would like to suggest is that we go back to where we were a year ago, and rather than pass the ordinance tonight, perhaps we take a breather, get together, have a public work session, or in some way sit down. I believe we're close enough that we can resolve this in the entirety, stop the litigation, and just come up with an ordinance that works for all parties. We have been and remain willing to do that. I think we're close enough that it would be appropriate. Rather than go on, what I'll do is answer any questions you might have with regard to our testimony or where we're at.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, Mr. Memon, thank you for your comments. And I guess I'd take the stand that Mr. Coffey had made before, and I realize it's an issue. And I'm personally one of those. As a military veteran, I understand the one issue was a military veteran with his service medals and perhaps some documentation about his birth certificates and military records, things of that nature. I'm very much attuned to my previous occupation and profession, the obligation to safeguard, safekeep, if you will, equipment, items that are of some value and that can be placed in ownership. Notwithstanding those particular items, a good percentage of the items that I think you encounter in the homeless camps are literally, again, you can describe it as one man's junk is another man's treasure kind of a situation. Tents, certainly, perhaps sleeping bags. But when you start getting into the weeds, when you've got a lot of really wet items, not only do you have to store items that you would normally could perhaps put in a box or a bag, but when you start taking into account of those kind of items, you're talking drying rooms, which creates even much more real estate. And I've yet to see the ACLU. I mean, I take Mr. Coffey's stand. We just simply don't have, and the taxpayers don't have, the funds to build a warehouse large enough, like Home Depot or Lowe's, to store that amount of items that we've seen out here. And so. So I ask, first of all, what would the ACLU, have you guys been undertaking any efforts in trying to meet those obligations, whether it be through nonprofit or corporate sponsorship or anything? I mean, right now I understand you've got the litigation before the courts, but has the ACLU been proactive in trying to engage the corporate community, nonprofits, in trying to meet some storage for that?
Through the chair, Mr. Assemblymember Honeman, I appreciate the question, and I want to say we agree with you. It is clear, and we don't question the police department's discretion in determining clearly there are items in encampments that are abandoned, that are trash, that are waste. The issue is that the way the ordinance is written, it encompasses all property. And clearly there will be property at a campsite where a police officer could look at it and determine this is a tent with a sleeping bag and clothes. The way the ordinance is currently written, that clearly usable, non-hazardous, non-dilapidated material would be deemed abandoned and thrown out. So, again, the ACLU is not trying to tell the municipality you must store all property or that the police department doesn't have the discretion to determine that some items are waste. It's really that the way the ordinance is written is overbroad. And, in fact, that's what the court said at the hearing, is that the ordinance was overbroad, the municipality asked, well, how would you fix it? The court said, I can't tell you how to write a constitutional ordinance. And that's what I'm trying to do, is sit and say, here's where the margins are. One thing that might be helpful is, it's been interesting in testimony, we had deposition testimony yesterday. Lieutenant Gilliam was incredibly helpful and very comprehensive in what he advised us of. He stated that generally the APD is really not able to get out for a site for a week or two. So it's interesting that the practical realities could coincide with an ordinance that we believe would be constitutionally appropriate. So it's not that we believe the municipality must store all the items. What we're saying is rewrite the ordinance so that it doesn't state that all items are deemed abandoned and thrown out. I think we can get to a place where all the needs are met.
Well, I guess the follow-up to that then, sir, is, and I don't know if I heard the answer to the question I asked, has the ACLU, have you or your agency been working with corporate or nonprofits to try to find, because even if it's not deemed abandoned for / abatement and disposal, you're still going to remove it from an legally placed area, and you still got to put it somewhere. And then, of course, there's the other logistics, which is transporting the items, handling and transporting, which would encompass, again, more resources that the municipality just simply doesn't have. And we're thankful that Ed O'Neill and Obara has undertaken a huge role. And certainly we've used, I know over my past knowledge and experience with community work service folks, to do that very same thing. So I guess I go right back to you again. Has the ACLU engaged in any discussions with corporate or nonprofits to try to find some location to store those items that you feel so compelled that we need to address for the 15 days? If it's 2 days, if it's 7 days, it's 15 to 30, the days that we may need to store those items.
Yeah, through the chair. And let me be specific. What we are stating is that we would recommend a 15-day notice period, at which point it would be appropriate to deem the property abandoned. So after 15 days, there would be no need for storage. You're trying to draw a constitutional balance. When is it reasonable and not constitutionally improper to throw something out? The municipality has other nuisance ordinances where you would abate a nuisance, an excavation, a hazardous swimming pool. And the standard period is 15 days. Based on that correlation, we would not, as an organization seeking to protect constitutional rights, come and say, no, you have to store the goods. We'd say, you know what? In every other instance, after 2 weeks, it's appropriate for the municipality to take action. At that point, we'd say, you know what? After 2 weeks, if you don't do anything, even if it is a good tent and a good sleeping bag and good clothes, you have to take some action, or it's not improper for the city to throw it out. So what I'm saying is, there would be no need to store if there were a reasonable notice period. Again, I don't want to tell the municipality how to run its business, but if there is no ability to store, then you have to have a constitutionally appropriate period. To answer your question, no, we have not reached out and looked for those services.
I've got others that need to get in here.
Thank you.
Chris?
Thanks for coming down. Jeff, just in general, are you supportive of the amendments proposed in the, okay, so that's affirmative. And secondly, it strikes me that this is, it's basically about public safety. I mean, we're worried, there's neighbors that are worried about their kids, transiting areas that are frequented by homeless, but obviously the homeless folks are subject to, great potential, liability from the standpoint of, being hurt, or we've had some real problems that way as well. So, but the sequence that I struggle with, there's a notice period. So, I mean, the property is not, even if it is abandoned, they have 5 days to recover that, right? And your contentions, that's not sufficient time for them, for someone to come back to where their encampment and recover their belongings.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Birch, there's two groups of property. Three. First, where there is public safety concerns, where there's a crime, where there's a hazard, where there's health or human safety issues, we have never contended and could not contend that there is any inability to immediately abate without any notice. So if there's a crime, if there's a potential fire hazard, if there's a biohazard, there is no constitutional right to that property. That's something that the municipality can appropriately and should appropriately abate immediately without notice. As to the property at the site, there's really two sorts of property. The abandoned property, the trash, the waste, there's no notice required for that. That can be taken away. Somebody can look at something and say, that's trash, there was an intent to abandon. We're talking about the very narrow category of goods that are clearly being used and that there has been no intent to abandon. So the notice is only required for those items.
Okay, but that abandonment isn't determined until there's been a 5-day period of time for the owner of those goods to return and recover those. So they have 5 days' notice to basically recover whatever it is, and if they don't do that, that's when they would be determined to be abandoned.
Through the chair, and I want to be clear, I cannot tell you that there is a magic number. I cannot tell you that any court has specifically looked and said 2 days is too little, 5 days is okay, 15 days is great. That I don't know. What we try to do is interpret the law based on existing practices. But essentially, you're correct. What the ordinance currently states is that after 5 days, it is, quote unquote, deemed abandoned. Right. We do believe that given that there's no other ordinance that has that short of a period, given that there are practical difficulties with that short notice period, that we believe it's constitutionally suspect. To answer your question specifically, the only other area where we have a concern with the amendments is the stay after the municipal hearing officer's decision. We believe, again, that's a little too short and not in keeping with other ordinances. But yes, otherwise, the ordinance really has met all the constitutional requirements. And again, we thank the mayor's office and the municipal attorney for making those amendments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff, thank you for coming out and being the only one to testify this evening. You made comments that were just about there, and you requested that this body postpone action until you can get together with the appropriate parties and iron things out. And how much time do you think that'll take?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Gray Jackson, we're happy to sit down immediately. I believe any time within the next 2 weeks, we could have a productive meeting. Essentially, even in litigation, you have what's called a settlement conference, where the judge would want you to do that anyway. We're obviously available at the call of the Assembly or the administration.
Right. And I think that's a good idea, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to ask the administration what their thoughts are on postponing that and sitting down once again and working this out.
Thank you. I'm going to let our attorney address it, and then I may chime in afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wheeler?
Through the chair, Assembly members, certainly there's never a barred door to making a proposal and having the Assembly consider it, or making a proposal through the pending litigation and having the administration consider it. That being said, because the ACLU has already indicated its support for this ordinance, and that this ordinance is designed to address concerns raised by the judge, I see no reason to postpone action on this to entertain settlements on the litigation or other code changes.
If you're proposing to stay action on this, I'd like you to wait until we're done with all the questioning, because I've got some Assembly members that the question has not been answered yet, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Harriet?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeff, for coming down. So is it my understanding that if we changed line 33 to read at least 15 days prior to beginning the removal of an illegal campsite, change it from 5 full business days to 15 days. I'm assuming you meant 15 days, not 15 business days, because then you'd be talking about 3 weeks.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Drum, that's correct.
Okay.
Either 10 business days or 15 days. I think either would be fine. That is the one area. The other area, and I apologize, was at line, page 5, lines 12 through 14 and 20 to 23. And essentially what that has to do with is after the administrative hearing officer is essentially representative of the executive branch and not specifically a judicial officer, and every person has the right to appeal a governmental decision to the court. Mm-hmm. The way that it's written now, you have 2 days, and in fact, if the decision were issued on a Friday, a person would have to go by Monday, find a lawyer, get to the court, file an appeal, and then file a motion to have it stayed. We just don't think that's reasonable. So we would like to see some reasonable stay to allow a person to appeal the administrative hearing officer's decision so that, again, their property is not thrown out. Alternatively, if there's a shortened period, it may be that those specific individuals who do file administrative hearing appeals, that property alone is taken into custody. Again, either would be appropriate, just so that when the person gets to court, there's something for the judge to deal with.
Okay. So in other words, the abatement, if I was to amend it to 15 days or 10 business days, then the abatement should also be amended to reflect what period of time? What's reasonable?
I think 10 business days would be very reasonable. That certainly gives somebody time to find an attorney, file appeal, and file a motion to the stay. It's expedited, but again, given the competing interests and the concerns of the municipality, I think it would be uncharitable for us not to sort of make that concession.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mittman, you kind of touched on the question I was going to ask you. I have not exactly been with you the last time we spoke about this issue, and you explained to me, and maybe you can reiterate the notion that with the current notice, a person might not actually be able to get back to retrieve their possessions within the period that's set in code now. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Gutierrez, that's correct.
So kind of where my thinking on this had turned after that discussion, is there any other infraction that a citizen of this municipality might commit that would cause them to have all of their worldly possessions thrown away because they were in jail for whatever reason and couldn't get back to where those possessions were?
Through the chair, we were not able to find one.
Right. That kind of helps crystallize what I'm thinking of this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman, quick question, sir, before we begin a lengthy discussion.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, no, at this point of the discussion. I'll hold the discussion.
There are no other questions for you, sir. Anybody else that wish to testify, please come forward. State your name for the record. This specifically deals with illegal campsites. Welcome, sir. You need to give us your last name and spell your last name.
Good evening. My name is Hugh Brown. My last name is spelled B-R-O-W-N.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time. I'm here to basically speak to some of the issues. First of all, I thank everybody that's worked on this issue. Like everyone here, I'm concerned about safety in our town, bike trails and those type of areas. As a former case manager that's worked with Homeward Bound, Anchorage Community Mental Health, and 4A's, that I'm aware of some of the issues that some of the homeless are facing. And so I really do encourage you to look at the humanitarian aspect of this. I think that the longer time that a person has to resolve their issues and to get back and get their possessions would be good for our city. I think that, and I know that people have, let's face it, if we had a fire at our home, we're not going to be worried about the television. We're going to be worried about the photographs, identification, those important documents. And a lot of times people have those in those camps. And if we just take them away and throw them away, then it puts them behind the curve even more. There used to be a program with one of the Lutheran services where they would help people get their ID to assist in that. There's no funding for that now that I'm aware of. And so people have an extra hardship while they're dealing with substance abuse, mental illness, and these other things that are going on. And the 2-day notice is just too short. And I do encourage people to look at 10 days, 15 days to work with this. And also, as we look at doing this ordinance, I would just hope that the leaders here would talk to our business community, our faith community, to look at ways that we can actually heal some of this. And so that way people aren't wounded more. They're already homeless. We understand about the public safety issue. We understand about, the, nuisance that, people don't want to bring people to Alaska and Anchorage and then have a whole bunch of homeless people around. But we need a more comprehensive solution than simply picking up their stuff and throwing it away too soon before they have a chance to get their possessions that mean a lot. That's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you, sir. Questions from Assembly members? Mr. Honeman has a question. Mr. Honeman?
Mr. Brown, thank you for your testimony, and I do appreciate it. And again, I'll go back to compassion and empathy. I know that you stated you worked as case managers. You certainly worked within nonprofit or charitable organizations.
Yes.
Have you given consideration that the fact that when people take, I guess as Mr. Gutierrez has identified, that all their worldly possessions and put them out into an unsecured area, and then either walk away from those to go get something to eat, to go to the restroom, go to their appointments, whatever, that they're leaving those items largely unsecured, and that they themselves are at risk of being victimized and being stolen from?
Absolutely, and let's acknowledge that it's not just the threat of an authority or municipality or somebody coming to pick up their stuff. There's other also homeless people that can come up and steal it. That's happened in the past and those type of things. But, you know, the human condition when people are infirmed or wounded or just broken, a lot of times they'll go get something to eat and they're not thinking. Sometimes they're intoxicated. And so these factors, we're not trying to give them a pass on, you know, their behavior. But until we have appropriate treatment and can heal that wound, we need to work with what we have. And so, again, yes, they do leave their stuff at risk, but a lot of times, you know, it's not just a municipality that's going to come in and take their stuff. It is the person sitting next to them. You know, so I acknowledge that, but I think that if their worldly possessions are there and they're, you know, there for a couple of days, let's not assume they're abandoned, because if they're lucky enough not to get them stolen, then let's give them a chance to get them back.
Paul? Anything else? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Mr. Brown, come in. There's no
Thank you for the opportunity.
here. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no on public hearings closed. Before we take action on this, because I think LVU may have a motion to postpone, why don't we go have our dinner break? When we come back, we'll pick this back up from here, because we're on new business anyway. We can pick it up. We'll be back shortly.
I don't want to postpone it.
When we left this last, we were on item 14G. The public hearing is closed. There is no motion on it. We need a motion on
Move to
2010.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments from assembly members. Please cue in. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the efforts that led to this proposal. That said, I feel like we're being asked to play a game of whack-a-mole here. We have an ordinance we don't think is constitutional. So here's another one. Well, the judge didn't like that one, so here's another one. And when the judge doesn't like this one, we'll give you one more. I'd be more comfortable if we sat down and actually acted like adults and worked this out. And in the meantime, I'm going to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Reference that, Mr. Ritter. Can we sit down and talk with the ACLU, or are we so far into the court system that we're prohibited from talking to them? Not for you guys, but just the assembly. That's my question, Mr. Wheeler.
Mr. Chairman, obviously, because we're in litigation, anything that you communicate to them could be used in the litigation. It would be my advice that you work through counsel to achieve whatever ends or goals you may have in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Ms. Osiander?
You know, we have been hearing for the past, over the past year about the problems with chronic inebriates in our parks. This is a concern that seems to be growing rather than lessening. And I think we have a responsibility to do what we can to try to help the police department and the administration move forward here. Basically, the ACLU brought litigation against the city almost immediately on this, as far as I know. I am not wanting to postpone this. I think we need to address the problem. It's a significant and serious problem. One of my community councils, it's one of the very top issues they have. We have to give the police tools to make our parks safe. I'm going to be supportive.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Honan?
Yes, and thank the gentleman who was here. I guess he came in late when we first started public testimony, but he brought up a good point. He said, what would prevent him tonight taking 4 or 5 pallets, some blue tarp, a couple of poles, and sticking it up on any of our school facility grounds, the park strip, sidewalk down near, I guess you could say the dirt area near City Hall, or Town Square even, and setting up a tent and saying, this is where I have to live now. And then we have to prolong the issues here. And I go back to a couple of things from both say, and I said it before during I'll say it again. I am as benevolent as the next guy. I'm pretty generous to a fault. Some people would say I've given my time, certainly, and my money, put my money where my mouth is. I am a veteran. I'm very concerned about anyone's property that has either some value or some, like their medals, their service records, and birth certificates. And there are some policies in place, an ordinance that covers safekeep and lost and found property. And I think we can work within those codes to safekeep and safeguard those items. And beyond that, the rest of it, I think people are leaving their personal belongings no different than if I left it out in my front yard, unsecured. I'm not asking for it, and certainly no one's entitled to take it. But you're subjecting it to being stolen or destroyed, set on fire. And this creates a huge public safety concern for me and people that I've heard from in our community, and I'm voting to pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burt, sir.
Yes, I'm supporting this and appreciate the mayor's initiative and the administration and their efforts to try to put this together. This is basically a public safety issue. It's public safety not only for the folks that live around our public parks and public lands, but it's also public safety for the homeless people that are living in these encampments. And I think that we've recognized the problem. I think this is going a long way toward a solution, and I think we just need to move on with this and approve this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gutierrez.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling with this one because it basically is a very good ordinance, and this is a serious problem that we need to do something about in all of my neighborhoods in my district. And it's a concern over the entire district, and it's a concern over most of the city. I think we're making some strides in the right direction, doing some things, looking at housing, having an ordinance to give the police some tools to clean the camps out in the first place is a great thing. However, to go back to Mr. Holman's example, if Mr. Chairman, if you and I leave home for work one day and one of us leaves our house unlocked and somebody comes in and robs us blind and takes everything, well, that's my fault. That's our fault. But if I leave the house one day and commit a crime and am picked up, that doesn't give the city the right to go in and take everything that I have. I can't think of a single crime, a single infraction that a person might commit in this city that would give the city the right to take everything they have, all of their family photographs, all of their personal possessions, their medications, legal or illegal, their birth certificate, their ID, their clothes that are hanging in their closet, and throw them in a dumpster. Commit a murder? That's not going to happen to you. Commit any other heinous crime you can think of that we have on the books that's illegal in this city, those things aren't going to happen to you. But if you're homeless and you're trespassing, which is a crime, there is no question, it is a crime, the city can potentially come and take every earthly possession that you have. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I'm struggling with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am sympathetic with the concerns of my fellow assembly members, but I'm also really frustrated on behalf of the neighbors in my district. Over the last couple of months, I've gotten an increasing number of emails and calls, tents, homeless encampments appearing in places where they've never been before. The Parks Department has been doing a yeoman's job of trying to clear underbrush where the Parks Department has jurisdiction. One of these homeless encampments is between the Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena and Northern Lights Boulevard. That is, it's within sight of Cars Aurora Village, thousands of people that drive past it every day. It's real close to West High School's campus. And I can see the tents when I drive by. I don't even have to get out of my car to see them. But for some reason, the plot in front of Dempsey Anderson has berms around it. Don't ask me who put berms there, but that makes a real good hiding place. Instead of being able to, clear the trees in front so you can have a clear shot through the trees into the parking lot, and have some eyes on the spot, it gives you an ideal place to hide. There's a triangle of land between Northern Lights and Benson where they split out just west of Carr's Aurora Village. It's in the middle of 3 roads. There is no way, you can barely walk there. There are homeless tents in there. I just got an email from somebody who lives on La Honda Drive, which is right on the edge of Fish Creek, right off Northern Lights. There are homeless encampments in there. Those are all within a few blocks of each other. And that beautiful piece of Spenard Road that just opened up, there are homeless encampments right there. They've now been created, as one of the neighbors likes to call it, a gated community, because the contractors put up chain link fence along part of the hill to keep people from walking off the multi-use trail into the park area and down to the lagoon. There's what we call the smaller lagoon, is right there next to the hill. But those folks will figure out a way to get into any spot. They've even taken the rocks from the Gabion rock wall and are throwing rocks at each other at night. And the neighbors who live on the hill and have been inconvenienced all summer but love what has been done are now having to deal with fistfights between homeless people. And the police department can't do anything because of this pending litigation. And for that reason, I'm going to amend this ordinance as suggested by Mr. Mittman a few minutes ago. On line 33, page 1, I want to change 5 full business days to 10 full business days. And on page 5, line 14, change that line to read, the abatement is stayed for at least 10 business days, 10 business days replacing the word to in line 14.
It's moved and seconded by Ms. Gray Jackson. Anything else, Harriet?
No, that's it right now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ernie, if you wish to speak on the amendment, or I can put you in the queue to speak on the original motion after we deal with this amendment, sir.
Actually, I'll probably be speaking to both. I'll not be supporting the amendment, and mainly because if there's one topic that I've had a lot of direction from my constituents, particularly in my community councils, I've been explaining to them all summer that we're working this out. We're going to find a resolution to it, and we want to make sure that we protect the rights of the homeless. But the question that they immediately turned and asked me is, well, what about our rights as citizens that are living here, having to continue to tolerate and put up with this? And they've all basically been pretty strongly of the opinion that they feel the 5 days is most adequate, and they would like to see the situation dealt with. So I would be a vote against the amendment and a vote for the ordinance as presented.
Thank you, sir. A little strange. Chris, I'll go to you first on the amendment, sir.
Just speaking against the amendment, I think we've come a long way here. I think 5 days is more than enough time. I mean, if somebody was camped out in your front yard for 5 days, it would seem like an eternity. I think what we have here is, as we've discussed earlier, is it's a public safety issue, and it's a responsibility that we have as property owners and property managers here to resolve this in a timely manner, and adding more time to that is not helpful. So I'll be a vote against the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Michaelis, on the amendment, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think, before we discuss the amendment any further, I think what you really need to hear is from the legal department, our attorney, actually how many days they get under this current way the ordinance is written. And so I'll turn it over to Dennis Wheeler.
Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, the code provision provides the 5 full business days once the site's been posted. So assuming that it carries over through a weekend for whatever reason, you get additional time there. once posted, if they take the opportunity to appeal, the hearing officer needs to set the hearing within 5 days. So that could be day 1 or day 5, depending on the schedule of the officer and the persons in the camp, adding more time. From there, once the decision is rendered, there's 2 more days. And then only after that, as I understand current APD policy, would they arrange for the abatement of the camp, pulling in the social service agencies, which takes time. Once that happens, the campers have the opportunity to take that AHA order and file in Superior Court another appeal and request an additional stay during the pendency of the appeal, in which case we're stayed from taking any action until the court system hears their case and renders a decision, which, as you know, can be anywhere from 30 days to a year. But in the meantime, even assuming they don't file the Superior Court stay, once the 2-day time period runs after the hearing officer decision, once the social services agencies are lined up, once we're on site, they have an additional 20 minutes to gather up their gear and take it with them. So under this proposed amendment, you're adding another 13 days in that process in addition to the time frame they already have.
Thank you, Dennis. Jennifer, on the amendment, ma'am?
Maybe the chief could help me on this. I know he wasn't chief when this first came in front of us, but it was my understanding when this was first brought to this body that that APD was looking for a way to mitigate the situation, not just for park users or the people in the community, but also for the homeless themselves. And if they had a shorter period of time, that gave them a better opportunity to get the social services agencies in there and actually help the homeless. Am I kind of going down the right bunny rabbit trail here?
Well, I think so. I believe the original ordinance was 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know that we were able to get geared up in that fast anyway, so it may have been too fast even for us. As you know, we're at 5 days now, and that is intended to give us the chance to work with the health department and other agencies to get in and help do something for the homeless so that help them ease them out of the camps and not leave them homeless. Part of the thing we're wrestling with is the longer that they're there, the more chances there are that they're going to be injured. We're having stabbings and stuff like that happening in these camps right now. It's longer that they are victims of theft and other things. We've heard of people going through these camps beating people. We want to limit the amount of time that happens, both because some of these folks are suspects and because some of these folks are victims. So there's that, as well as trying to clean the camps out in a timely manner to satisfy the neighbors who live nearby. So all that's rolled into our decision making. There was a lot of give and take coming around to the 5 days. 5 days might not be perfect, but it was the balance that we thought we could do at the police department that balanced the health department's schedule to get in and help us provide some services. Now, that 5 days is 5 working days, but there's 2 days at the end of that if the hearing officer says, nope, go ahead, and that takes us through a weekend, so that's really 9 days. So practically speaking, I'm not seeing where there's anything less than 9 days that we'd be working with here. So I think that's a little bit longer than the 5 days. I mean, I think it's going to be 9 days. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the issue on tonight's ordinance isn't the length of time. When the court issued the TRO, it didn't hang the temporary restraining order on the amount of time. The restraining order was based on a few other items, such as that 2 days at the end of the hearing, and a couple other minor things that has to do with the posting in the camp. We don't have a problem making those adjustments. So if you act on this ordinance tonight, we can still negotiate with ACLU and see if we can come to an agreement, but we've got the chance now to go back to court, and if this ordinance that you will pass tonight would satisfy the court, they may lift the TRO. We could be back in business during the period of time when we're waiting for trial. The courts will ultimately decide whether or not it's 5 days or 10 days or 15 days, but at least we'd have an ordinance in the meantime. And if we can avoid trial by working something else out, we can always come back to you with another version. And if the ACLU and us agree with it, I think it would be a quick conversation.
Jennifer? Thank you, Chief. On the amendment, other comments from Assembly members? If not, please vote. Yes will approve the amendment, and no will not. He's gone for the day. Amendment fails. We now have in front of us 14G without any amendments. Any other discussion? Ernie, did you have anything else to say on 14G? Okay. Let me bring it up. What? I don't know. I saw it. Okay, please vote. This is on the main motion in front of us, unmodified. This is 14G. Votes are all in. That is approved as written. Next item in front of us is item 14H. It's a resolution AR 2010-254, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving a modification to an existing alcoholic beverages conditional use for a package store use and license number 162 in the B3 General Business District to add 1,702 square feet to the existing. This is the Brown Jug Liquor Eagle River Store, located at 11221 Old Glen Highway. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. You'll have 3 minutes or longer.
Okay.
Welcome, sir.
My name is O.C. Madden. I'm Director of Operations for Brown Jug. We've been in operation at this location for some time. I think this license has been active in this location for close to 50 years. We just want to expand our store into a space we're currently using for storage and expand the retail space. And basically, I just wanted to be available to answer questions if anyone had any. Or
Thank you, sir. Questions from Assembly members? There doesn't appear to be any, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody who's wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, what's the wish of the body? Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Ms. Osiander moved it. Ms. Osiander, any comments, ma'am?
It's well supported within my community. It's been in existence a long time.
Okay. Any other comments from Assembly members? Please vote. That item is approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14I, Ordinance AO 2010-56. An ordinance amending the zoning map, providing for the rezoning of approximately 44.23 acres from I-1 Light Industrial District to I-2 Heavy Industrial District for Track 2 International Industry Center Subdivision, generally located south of International Airport Road, east of Minnesota Boulevard, and west of the Alaska Railroad tracks. Teku Campbell, Spenard Community Council's Planning and Zoning Case Number 2010-028, Planning Department. And there's a same memorandum with it, AM 434, 2010. Public hearing this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify? Come and testify in front of the body, and please spell your last name for us, because every now and then it's being transcribed. We need to be able to spell it. Welcome. You'll have 3 minutes, ma'am.
My name is Denise Strauss, S-T-R-A-U-S-S. I live back behind in the subdivision that is back behind just north of the railroad tracks, which is already an industrial area that is very a nuisance to us homeowners that are there. There's a gravel pit there, there's a steel plant there, which is already industrial. We live on the other side of the trees, so we hear everything and get all the dust, dirt, and everything else and the noise. Plus, we also hear Minnesota. So now they want to make it even more industrial. What is the air quality we're going to have? There are people that are widowers that have lived there. The gravel pit has been there less time than these houses have. So now they want to make it more of an industrial area where we're subject to air, our quality of life. And we're all basically pretty much all behind trees, so nobody sees us because we're behind the trees. We've got the railroad tracks going through, we've got the airplanes going through. So I'm objecting to this, and I speak for several of my neighbors that have also, we've spoken to each other. Some of them are neighbors that have been there, the very first owners of the houses that are still there. The gravel pit behind us used to be a lake. There used to be one railroad track, now there's two, plus the railroad track, the trains go into the gravel pit at all hours of the night, blowing their horns anywhere from 1 to 13 times. I've called the city for noise. They come out in the afternoon, well, they're doing it at 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. So adding more industrial to this area, where's our quality of life? Because the big guys are over on the other side of the trees. So I'm objecting to this, and I speak for several of my neighbors.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Flynn has a question. Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Strauss, thank you for coming down. What street specifically do you live on?
We live on 58.
58. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. It's the corner. It's the house that if you look at if you look at 58 that goes around, and plus there's a business behind ours, so we're in our vacant lot, our pie shape for the business. So we're on where 58 comes straight and then starts to curve, that big pie shape. That's where our house is, and they blow their train. The train blows it right there by our house. So we have all that.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we have more questions for you, if you don't mind. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, thank you for coming down and testifying, and love to encourage others to do so. In fact, did you bring a list of names of neighbors where they live?
No, I didn't.
Okay, that's generally recommended. That'd be very much more powerful to see how many people. The other thing is, you do know that there's currently an industrial rating on that property. So really, it's going from the petition is from going light industrial to heavy industrial. It's still industrial area, and there's still an ability for them to place businesses in the area either way. So
yeah. Well, the thing is, too, is that these houses, the subdivision was built in 1967.
Right.
Okay, then the gravel pit, the gravel pit started showing up. And they've been in there ever since. And like I said, they said, oh, we'll be nice neighbors, but they haven't been. Very noisy. You've got they're running the conveyor belt, crushing the rocks all night long. And you hear that thing squealing, you hear the horn going, and then also you've got the train coming in. He blows it, it's supposed to be 2 long, 1 short, 2 long. That guy will blow that horn anywhere from 1 time to 13 times than I've counted. And like I said, then they're taking and dumping the dirt into the trucks and the gravel into the trucks, all hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week sometimes. And then to add more to us, you know, we don't get, and we've got even quiet home, and unless you keep your house so sealed up, you can't go outside your house. You can't sit on your deck. You can have a barbecue because you've got all the noises and everything else. So now if they put more stuff in there, and then the air quality also is, you know, our houses are dusty, our breathing, you know, we have a hard time breathing. I at least have a hard time breathing. You know, we've been there 13 years.
A quick question then, if you've been there that long, do you know of any resolutions or action you've taken as a community council approaching the business owners in the area?
I have called the mayor's office. When Babbage was in, I called Mayor Sullivan now and talked to him. and he just put me off. And then I've talked to the noise control. There's been several people that I have talked to and tried to call. They've come out to my house, and they go, well, the noise level, and then they said, well, what about at night? I said, they go, we're here during the day.
Okay.
So that, and like I said, I called, I can't remember who I talked to, but I just called the noise, and I says, I am standing in my kitchen right now. And she said, oh my God, that is that loud in your house? I said, yes. And this is what we've been going through. And like I have asthma really bad, so I've got all that air and everything else coming.
Debbie Osander has a question. Debbie?
I just wanted to clarify. There will be an opportunity once a building permit is given to have the community come and talk about particular concerns about buffering. Isn't that true, Mr. Weaver?
Well, it's kind of hard to buffer.
Just a second. I just want to confirm that that's the case. There'll be another opportunity once the specific land use plan is up.
Madam Chair, Mr. Osiander, for the gas-fired power plant, I'll let Mr. Steyer speak to that issue, but in the rezoning of that, it would require a conditional use in the I-2 district.
Okay. So in that case, with a conditional use permit, there would be a public hearing. And I would just really encourage you and your neighbors to go to that public hearing and talk about what issues are most concerning to you.
Yeah, because
But
also,
frankly,
they're also going to bring Minnesota, Dowling around to us too. So that's another noise thing.
Understand. But frankly, this is just an industrial use going to a different industrial use that at least potentially won't have the gravel extraction part with it, because they're talking about a utility generation plant there for making electricity.
Okay, now what about the air quality that's going to go along with that?
I think it would be really helpful for you to have a conversation with the utility folks when it's a little bit closer. And see that gentleman who's leaning over there? Grab him at a break to talk to him, too. He's with the utility company.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. No other questions. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. State your name and spell your last name, please.
Yes, my name is Ronald Jordan, J-O-R-D-A-N. I chair the Taco Campbell Community Council. Chief Electric has met with the council over the past few years in regards to their expansion. We did talk about sound barriers and noise in the neighborhoods and everything. And they indicated that they were checking on that, maybe looking at putting up sound barriers and so forth. We do not object to this. We support the expansion which is needed for the city of Anchorage for its future growth. And like I said, we have met with them several times over the past few years. So, and I don't remember this lady being at any of our meetings, but she's more than welcome to come in next month.
Ron, you might talk to her when you get a chance. Just let her know when you guys meet, if you would, please. Debbie has a question for you, Ron.
Well, I was just going to make sure that West 58th is in Taco Campbell. It is, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Is West 58th in your community council boundary area?
Our meeting, in our meetings with Phil, lined everything out, but we meet the second Thursday of every month.
He didn't hear you, Debbie.
Okay,
and
thank you.
That's at Diamond Center Hotel.
Thank you, Ron. There are no other questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Anybody
Chairman.
else wishing to testify,
Mr. Chairman.
please come forward. Yes.
I need to make a correction on the record about the conditional use. The conditional use is required in the I-1 district, but it's now required in the the I-2 district. So my apologies for that. But
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ron. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Come on, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Phil Steyer, S-T-E-Y-E-R. I work for Chugach Electric. The item before you tonight, to be clear, is a request for rezoning of property that's currently zoned I-1 to I-2. The property in question has had a gas-fired power plant on it since 1964. It will continue to have a gas-fired power plant on it. We are in the process of building a new power plant in a joint venture with Anchorage Municipal Light and Power. And as Mr. Weaver pointed out, our choices are, today you can have a power plant on land zoned I-1. If Title 21 passes, we'll need either I-1 with a conditional use permit or I-2. And it seems the most appropriate to go ahead and in advance rezone this property to I-2. And that's an action that we propose that has the support of the Planning Department, recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and supported by the applicant. So we appreciate your consideration of that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Osander has a question, sir. Ms. Osander?
How would you advise neighbors who have specific concerns to interact with you?
We will have to meet ordinances and a variety of permit requirements in order to build this power plant, and that includes emissions requirements as well as the municipal noise ordinance. And so the issues I heard raised by the previous testifiers are not new issues to us. Those are issues that we will address through our somewhat lengthy permitting process in order to be allowed to build this power plant.
I'm assuming, too, that you'll continue to go to the Taku Campbell Community Council meetings to share information?
Correct. Part of our outreach on this has been to appear not only at the Taku Campbell Community Council meeting, but at the Spenard Community Council meeting, the Turnagain Community Council meeting, and the Sand Lake Community Council meeting repeatedly over the last several years. This site happens to sit at a corner that is abutted by, we sit in one community council, we're nearly, we're abutted by two others, and we have a nearby additional council that takes an interest in our activities. So we've made a number of council presentations.
Thank you, Ms. Osander. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Steyer, for coming out and answering those questions. As I see the big picture, and then I see the one that was just passed out, I'm referring to this handout with that is kind of color code shaded. The area in pink, that's the area that you're looking at?
No. The area in pink is our neighbor. That's the granite gravel operation that the previous speaker spoke about. Our area being rezoned is above that. Okay. It's sort of that somewhat triangular shaped. It's got a yellow boundary around it.
Future Arctic Distribution Substation?
Yeah, that's in the lower right-hand corner of that. So it's the part that says Chugach Headquarters parcel. And you shouldn't do math in public. You shouldn't try and read upside down, apparently. This is the question. This is what we're asking for rezoning. Okay. It's 44 acres. Now, we own that little parcel off to the left as well. And this is color-coded. Things in green are I-1. Things in red are already I-2. The yellow is transition. We own this little parcel off to the left that's our operations storage yard. That's an example of something that's currently I-1 that we're not requesting rezoning to I-2 because the use we intend for it, the storage of poles and other materials, doesn't require that. But the headquarters parcel is where the new power plant will be built in the sort of lower right central corner, and that's where it's appropriate, we believe, to take this zoning action now.
And thank you so much. And so, as I understand it, and of course I'm a long-time self-admitted Chugach power consumer user, as I am with another property with the MLNP, and so I have a vested interest in having continued power for the future as well in both parcels. I know that in the past in conversations you guys have been very responsive to neighbors. Being a good neighbor is a big part of your operation. Am I to assume, without, I guess, need to ask, are you continuing to pledge to be a good neighbor? And as I know you've already spelled out the attendance at the community councils, and you'll do what was within your power and reasonable to try to mitigate any issues, neighbor.
Yeah, that's correct. I often point out to people, we've been in business in this town for, nearly 60 years, and there's no foreseeable end in sight for us. So we're here for the long haul, and it's in our best interest to be a good neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Steyer.
Thank you. Mr. Birch.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for coming down. I just wanted to clarify now, we already have generation located on that parcel, correct?
Correct. There are 3 gas turbine generators on this parcel that have been there and operated as a power plant since the 1960s.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the generate, I mean, it's obviously newer style generation being located there, but there has been generation on this parcel for a number of years.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your map here, in the lower left-hand corner, you have the SPP laydown area. Have you guys acquired that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you. That was the only question.
Thank you. That's all our questions, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Harriet?
Actually, I stopped in and visited Phil this afternoon when I was heading through the area, and I said, this is on our agenda tonight. I may as well stop by and take a look. And I drove Electron Drive. I drove down through that where Electron Drive takes a 45-degree angle through the southwest corner of the headquarters parcel and all the way over to the railroad tracks and back. And it's pretty heavy industrial in that area, and I understand what the concerns are. But I live near a heavy business district myself. I knowingly bought a house there, and you just got to work with the neighbors and make things work if things get untenable. So I appreciate your coming out and talking to us, and I hope you'll work with the neighbors to buffer that eastern zone if there's any way possible to do that.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. No other questions. Anybody else wants to testify on this issue, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no in public hearings, close. What's the wish of the body? I'm sorry. Mr. Flynn, did I miss you? Nope. Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion from assembly members? Please vote. That was approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14J. Ordinance AO 2010-57 is ordinance amending the zoning map providing for the rezoning of approximately 3.31 acres from B3 General Business District to I1 Light Industrial District for lots 2, 3A, and 4A.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Nicia. So anyone wants to try it, let me know.
Looks at Piers Chairman. I'll take a stab at Piers Nakla subdivision.
I'll use that one. The Nakla subdivision. Please come forward and state your name clearly for the record.
That's funny.
Anyone hearing and say no in public hearings, close the wish of the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion from assembly members. Ms. Osiander, ma'am.
I just wondered if there's a representative of the petitioner here. I had a question.
Jerry, do you know anybody?
Mr. Chairman, I don't recognize the petitioner in the audience and doesn't appear to be here, but I possibly could answer whatever questions you might have.
Well, I just read the comment from the Arctic Brewing Supply that was on page 24 of the large packet, where they said they're having problems with the trucks backing up into their business, and I wanted to, I guess, make the petitioner aware that that concern existed, see if they knew it. But if they're not here, there's not much I can do about it.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments from assembly members? Having none, please vote. Ms. Drummond? That was approved by the body. Thank you, Deb. Next item in front of us is item 14K, Ordinance AO 2010-61. An ordinance amending Municipal Code Section 26.70.030, use of municipal collection service required. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before you open the public hearing on this, I want to note first there's an S version available. If anyone didn't get it, please see Amanda over there. She, I think, has some extra copies, right, Amanda? Yeah, and it should be on your desk, my colleagues, as item 14K2. Second point, Mr. Chairman, been asked to hold this one over till our next meeting. So, while, of course, people are welcome to testify tonight, we will be continuing the public hearing if my colleagues agree to the 28th. And, of course, as always, they can only testify one time.
Thank you, sir. Public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. And Mr. Haycox, please spell your last name for the record. I have the advantage. He used to be one of my professors years ago. I know his last
first
name.
name also, Stephaycox for the record. The proposed amendment asks for the power of exemption, and if an exemption were granted under the amendment, it would affect property that I own. I approached Mr. Flynn about this. He invited me to make a statement and submit a written statement, which perhaps you have. By your leave, Mr. Chairman, I'll just summarize this. I think I wrote this in a hurry. There are some typographical errors in it. I'd like to give a corrected copy to the clerk, if I might, at some point. Thank you very much.
We don't grade, sir. It's okay.
The instance I address involves a common driveway for adjacent properties, one of which is, two of which properties I own. The driveway's on municipal right-of-way, and to provide collection service, the collector has to drive off of Bootlegger's Cove onto this common driveway, past the two properties that I own. This is the only vehicular access for collecting trash there. The common driveway being on municipal right-of-way, the municipality is not going to pave that or maintain it, so a portion of the cost of maintaining that is going to fall on me, and that's my principal objection. I also object for aesthetic reasons, and I guess as a general principle, I object to exemptions to ordinances, although I understand that they're sometimes necessary. These properties have long been serviced by dumpster, but earlier this summer, Solid Waste Services said they were going to terminate that and wanted all of the properties to go to trash cans. I applauded that decision. I continue to applaud it. There's a public safety issue there. The trucks can't back safely back out onto Bootlegger's Cove Drive. That was confirmed by conversation and observation with a driver who came out to test that just last Friday. There are also preschool and early school children living in the residences adjacent to this public driveway, and I think that that is a major public safety concern. As I said, my principal concern, aside from all of those, is that those heavy trucks have already damaged that asphalt driveway, which I'm going to be partly responsible for paying for the upkeep of. The lighter trucks that service the trash cans don't do nearly as much damage, so the driveway will last a lot longer. The Solid Waste Services under existing ordinance already has the power to grant exemptions. I would point out that should Title 21 be approved by the Assembly, that's going to obviate this whole thing, because these are not fourplexes, they're duplexes, and as I understand the reading of Title 21, dumpsters would be prohibited for anything less than fourplexes. So this seems to be only an attempt to buy a little bit of time, which I don't quite understand. My principal objections then are the cost that's going to accrue to me from the heavy trucks continuing to use that area or to reuse it if it is approved, if the amendment is approved, and also the aesthetic and thematic aspect of this. The dumpsters are ugly and they don't really, I think, have a place. This is the west end of South Addition, with which you're all familiar. It's a somewhat upscale area, and the dumpsters, I think, are clearly out of place there. I would appreciate very much the opportunity to address the Assembly on this matter. I do so now because I recently retired from the university and my wife from the school district, and we have some travel plans that might obviate our being here on the 28th. I like to say I didn't get out of town quite quickly enough. They hired me back half-time for a little while, but the only way to make it half-time, my wife assures me, is to get out of town. So we're going to try that. Thank you so much for your attention.
Mr. Flynn, sir.
Dr. Haycox, I just want to thank you for coming down tonight and for taking the time to speak with me about this a couple of times in the preceding week.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions for Dr. Haycox?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Real quick question.
Excuse me.
One quick
Mr.
question.
Honeman has a question, sir.
My understanding, of course, if this remains in solid waste service area, which I suspect it is solid waste service because of the ordinance way it's affecting, you do know that they're using the wheeled containers, the trash containers. I think I read in your letter that you're building a container rack, I guess.
I have already built some elevated wooden shelters with roofs and shakes and all to hold my trash cans. So that's already installed.
But the rolled carts, my understanding is that those little one-armed bandits won't be able to fit to get those out of there if they do that.
And I've already talked to Mr. Flynn about that and to solid waste services. I'll just have to expand that and make it possible for them to service them, and I'm happy to do that.
And then the other thing is that those trucks, I understand, are fairly large too. Now, they won't be so much probably the backing, but getting into the area. They're a pretty good-sized truck, as I've seen them, as I recall. Do you think they'll have the same problem that the dumpster trucks are having right now?
The smaller trucks can get in and turn around. The big dumpster truck just can't do that. They're way too big.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from Assembly members? Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to testify on this issue, please come forward. Keep in mind, this item will be continued to our meeting on the 28th. You can only testify once. Seeing no one, Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue the public hearing on this matter to our meeting on September 28th.
Second.
Ask unanimous. Seeing no objection, this item will come in front of us on the 28th. Now, relative to 14L and 14M, the administration has asked the public hearing on this resolution will be continued to 9/28. And on the next one, on 14M, the request is to be continued to 9/28. You only get to testify once. So if what you want to do is testify on this issue, you can testify tonight, but you can't testify on the 28th. So it's your choice to which one you want to do. Action on this will not be taken tonight. It will come up on the 28th. So it's up to you as to whether you want to testify tonight or wait till the 28th. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward.
And Mr. Chairman, as we wait for someone to come down, just a reminder that I declared a potential conflict of interest when this was introduced, and you ruled that I would be required to.
Yes, you're forced to stay here. In fact, you're chained to your chair.
Hi, my name is Rich Klein, and I'm the owner of Klein Cesaro, 5th and Gamble. And the property description is East Addition, Block 25B, Lot 29A. And I'm confused, okay, somewhat confused. I had the Downtown Improvement District come down and they had me fill out this form saying if I wanted to terminate my downtown termination, and I thought it was, I've been paying all this here for 10 years. I've been paying this money for 10 years. Then they told me I had an option, you know. So, of course, I wished to terminate because I am at the very end of the boundary, at the very end. And the service I get is like Mr. Trainee got there on his IM. You know, you paid out $100 for your IM the other day, and because you had the gas cap loose, right?
Yep.
That was. You remember that? Okay.
I remember it.
I get the same service.
I could not tell my wife about that. Okay.
Well, it's known fact now. Okay. But I don't get anything but picking up a few papers, okay? And I got a service station. I do my own plowing. Keep the sidewalk clean, and I'm paying $500 some just to have them come in and pick up some paper. So I think the boundaries are way extended as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't see why we had to push the boundaries all the way up to my end of my town when I just found out that the boundaries is going to go down to L Street. L Street is where the big hotels are at, you know. It never has been down there, and that confuses me. That's where I'm getting the confusion at. So I think the boundaries need to be tightened up a little bit. You know, I mean, the program is a good program in so many ways, but you know, you're trying to collect more money by extending the boundaries and for people that doesn't get the service, because I'm not getting the service, And so I feel that we should, close the boundaries down instead of extending them in my case, because there's no tourist that comes up to my end of town. I don't get anybody up there to come up there and to buy anything because I am so far up the street, I get the homeless up there, I get the people from Brother Francis Shelter up there, but, those people, are different. So I really think that we need to assess this and close down the size of this. It does good things, but trying to make it bigger is I don't think is better. So.
Well, thank you. I just need to make sure everybody understands that 2010 251 deals with the 2010 assessment district. If you take a look at 14M, the 2010-58 deals with the new district that includes the Captain Cook Hotel in it. Right. So it's two ordinances. One is the current year assessment. The new one is the new district. So if you want to testify on the new district, you can do that too.
Okay, I better do that, huh?
Or you can wait till next meeting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think that again, the boundaries are too large, and I'm a busy guy, so I probably won't be back on the 28th. But you heard my 2 cents worth, and that's it.
I'm sure my wife appreciates you being here. Questions for Mr. Klein? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Klein, if there's anything I can clarify about this, I'll catch up with you after the meeting. We can talk for a few minutes, okay?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward. Hello, sir.
Hi. I'm John Opinski. I'm with Frampton Opinski. We represent several of the property owners along L Street, so I'm actually speaking towards the expansion. I'm not able to be here on the 28th. I sent a letter later this afternoon that many of you've got. I do have copies of it. I can give to you if anyone would like a copy after this, or Mr. Flynn has one. We actually represent Cal Worthington Trust, who owns the 7 office floors of Peterson Tower. We represent the 4+4 LLC, which owns a floor of the 500 L Street building. And then we also represent L Street Investments. And Mr. Atkinson, I believe, is going to testify at a later date regarding their comments. As you can see from the letter we wrote, we have strong feelings about this subject. 10 years ago, when at that time the BID was proposed, we successfully argued that it wasn't going to be a benefit to the buildings on the west side, primarily because the security, the sidewalk maintenance, sweeping, ice melting, things of that nature, already done by our properties. We have very large budgets to take care of these items. Because of liability, we cannot afford to have slip and falls. We were successful in being exempted from that the first time. Now that it's come up for renewal, the Captain Cook has decided to join. And the Captain Cook has very different needs and very different business, uses that are enhanced by the programs and the events done by the Anchorage Downtown Partnership. While it's a beneficial program to downtown, we don't feel that it really benefits our owners. Because we spend, as you can see in the Peterson Tower letter, for example, our budget, we spend $100,000 to $200,000 a year maintaining our properties. And unless somehow the Downtown Partnership can indemnify these office buildings to be there guaranteed by 6:30 in the morning as we are to clear our lots, we just don't feel we're going to get any real benefit. The main reason for that is the buildings are generally shut down by 6 p.m. And their office buildings are shut down, and we're not really seeing any benefits to this. We're not a parking company that sees increased traffic. We're not a restaurant or a retailer or anybody else that sees the true benefits of this. So happy to answer any questions about the opinions of the folks we represent.
We have a few for you, sir. Ms. Osiander, ma'am.
It's my understanding that there was some polling that was done by, I think, the Downtown Partnership. Did you participate in that?
We did, and in fact, we had a positive conversation with Mr. Schutte of Downtown Partnership and Mr. Wong and sorry, I forget the other gentleman's name at this point, but we told them if there was something beneficial that we could go back to our owners and say, look, this is a positive thing for you because we've got a snow dump that's closer, for example, to where we can offset some of our hauling costs because we have to clear those lots. We manage about 350 parking spaces downtown. They all have to be cleared by 6:30 in the morning. And during a late snowfall and things like that, if we have to truck it all the way out, which is typically South Anchorage, it's a very expensive operating cost for the buildings. So,
did you tell him that yes or no?
we told him no.
Told him no.
Yes, we told him that we were not interested, and many of the owners in that area feel that it's also not appropriate to have existing DID members vote to annex an extra area. To us, it's akin to saying, well, Eagle River people and Girdwood people come to downtown and let's tax them too. So,
don't get her started.
You're turning and talking to my good side here.
You're on the fight here, mister.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, heavens. Paul?
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming down and testifying. We had kind of a brief conversation with Mr. Schutte and his group as well, and having in my previous occupation, I've watched the downtown area transition into the DID, or what I call the Anchorage Downtown Partnership, and their services that they have provided. And I read with special interest where you stated that you don't feel like you're getting anything in one of the areas that apparently you guys do pay, one of the buildings area. You don't really feel like you're getting anything?
We really haven't. We've had Cal Worthington Trust owns a parking lot in the southeast corner of 6th Avenue and K Street, across from the legal building where the permanent fund used to be located. And if we don't maintain the sidewalks there, if we don't ice melt them, if we don't shovel them, things like that, we will get letters from the right-of-way saying that there's a buildup of ice. We've seen an occasional four-wheeler go blazing by there, but for the most part, nobody in our offices were down there up until a couple of years ago. Never seen any services even that far west. So even that, although not a big amount of money, it's $600 a year. We just don't feel like we've gotten any services.
And that's the point, I guess. And it does look like you've at least tried to talk with Mr. Schutte or the Downtown Partnership people in the past. Again, having in my past occupation, I've noticed that a lot of the area downtown, and mainly I will admit that it's been more like in the area of the downtown bars and the town square and the old city hall premises, and even out farther west towards the McKay building when they increased out in that area, that it really did reduce the amount of what I call people loitering and the vagrancy just sitting around on the walls and things like that. So I've actually noticed, and I'm not even a downtown business owner, but I do frequent businesses and visit downtown often. So I've personally seen the benefits of ADP and the DID. But and again, I go down there because I recognize they have maintenance ambassadors and security ambassadors, sure. And I feel better with my family and visitors when I go downtown because I know they're down there.
Sure, and I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact there's been a lot of positive developments as a result of the Downtown Partnership and the ambassadors but the argument for the West Side landowners is that it's really mostly a tourist-related, it's evening events, and it really has a lot of positive benefits to the owners of parking facilities, to retailers, to restaurants, to things like that. I've lived downtown all my life. I worked downtown for over 20 years, and so I'm a big downtown guy, and I can certainly appreciate, and I have small children, and we go to downtown events. That said, I still don't think it's appropriate to annex this extra area of office buildings that are shut down at 6 o'clock. So,
Thank you, sir. There are no other questions. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, members of the Assembly, my name is Garrett Wong. That's spelled W-O-N-G. I'm the board president for the Downtown Partnership, and the reason I'm speaking tonight is I'd like to encourage all of you to go ahead and pass the ordinance in our favor. The Downtown Partnership has been operating without the new district for the last 13 years, and I think the downtown area, including this new boundary ending on L Street, is directly benefiting from all that we do for the core central business district as well as for the new proposed area. And if any of the stakeholders in our district have had a shortfall on any services that we are trying to deliver, we certainly encourage them to make a call to the office and have a conversation about those specific shortfalls so that we can resolve them directly. And as a result, I think we have gained a lot of support from our existing stakeholders because of that responsiveness. So we would encourage the existing as well as any proposed new stakeholders to contact us if there are any shortfalls. But as a general rule, our focus is to provide a clean, a safe, and a very vital downtown, which is core to not only the retail, the hotelers, the restaurateurs, but also our office occupiers. First National Bank is primarily an office building downtown. The Alaska Mutual Building is primarily an office facility downtown. And those facilities as well provide their own security and surrounding building maintenance. But they are in support of what we are doing because they know that their tenancy and their occupancy is well benefited by the vital, safe, and downtown environment provided by what we do. So again, those are my comments for this evening, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
A few questions for you, Garrett. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Wong, for your testimony. And I think you answered one of the first questions I had. I saw Mr. Schutte in attendance, so I think I noticed with the previous meeting that you guys from the ADP take very seriously your responsibilities of providing the services that you say you're going to provide. And of course, I've seen and heard now from someone who said they really don't see the services that they think that they're paying for, and so I'm glad to hear that you say you welcome the contact and the call to get a chance to remedy those. And I guess just anecdotally here, I know that you've been in the past someone who's been on TV with financial advice and things of that nature. As an economist, do you think this is a good value for the dollar, I guess?
Well, I think as we look at it from citizens here, residents of the city of Anchorage, I think all of us know well enough, as we go around traveling throughout the country, any vital, strong city has a vibrant downtown. And I think we in Anchorage have the same opportunity to have that same strong downtown core. And I think because we do and have worked at it for the last 13 years, and I think delivered it successfully, I think all of Anchorage is better because we have a strong downtown core. And I think past Mayor Mystrom said it well when the concept of the downtown partnership was formed 13 years ago, that when Dan Cuddy of First National Bank came up to him and said, Mayor, things aren't looking real well for downtown. In fact, we've decided to move out of downtown because we think it's going to be a failure inside of 5 years. That was a real teller to our city administration. And I think the action taken since then has turned the horse cart around for the benefit of all of us here. So I would encourage us to think forward and to move with the new acquisition so that we can have a cohesive downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Flynn, sir.
Mr. Wong, thank you for coming down. Good to see you. We've heard from a few folks who've expressed concerns about levels of services provided. Have you had, are there any examples of other current downtown business improvement district residents, property owners who've had concerns and come to talk to you, and how's that worked out for you?
In terms of just saying they had not been receiving services?
Yeah, them contacting you and you trying to remedy that. For example, do you have some positive examples of how that worked out?
We do.
Negative?
We do. As an example, First National Bank, since the origination of the district, was never really a big supporter of the district. In fact, in the last renewal 10 years ago, the Cuddy operations said, no, we're not going to vote yes for this. I mean, they were in it because of default, they were in it, but they were really never a supporter. We spoke directly with Sue Foley, branch manager of operations. She and Mr. Cuddy reviewed the situation again, and they are now strong supporters of what we've done. We've talked to the Hickles, who run Hickle Investment and the Captain Cook Hotel. They, at the same time, 13 years ago, were not strong supporters of this operation. And today, as we closed our meeting with Mr. Hickle and the investment group, trying to solicit their participation, they were very much on board with the objectives of the operation and that they have observed the success of what downtown has been because of its establishment 13 years ago. So those are just a couple of stories that I think are helpful in making your decision.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, a lot of the responses we've received from people that aren't as interested in the downtown district tend to be office buildings as opposed to service facilities or hotel or tourism. And they say that as office facilities, they are able to maintain their buildings for their purpose, and they've seen little benefit, or they don't see the benefit of being part of your downtown business district. But how do you respond to that?
Well, Ms. Johnson, I think that with regard to building owners and their direct property management services, I would say that the net benefit might be measured as negligible because of what they have spent and what they have budgeted to spend to maintain their property values. The one missing piece that I think is very difficult to quantify, but yet has a very impactful result, is the fact of the vital facility that we provide. When I speak of the vital, not only are we speaking of the events that we sponsor, well over nearly 200 events every year in the downtown area, but I'm speaking of the general advocacy for not only retail but for office operations. For instance, the GSA and other governmental agencies who are more or less obliged to focus their attention on the downtown core area as a primary rental area has been refocused again on the downtown Central Improvement District because of our direct conversation with GSA as an example. And because of that, we think we are a direct benefit to our landlords, especially office landlords, because if we didn't have that advocacy as a one voice of downtown speaking to them, they would be expanding their leasing districts to Midtown and even to south of town. So as a result of this level of advocacy, as one example, we have now corralled a higher concentration of potentially governmental office rentals in the downtown area, as just one example. The other comment I would make is that the general ambiance of downtown is this. It's a walking district to to Anchorage. Anchorage is a broad, south, midtown, and downtown. And downtown really is the most accommodating for walking traffic. And I think the ambiance of this walking traffic is all about what we're trying to do, which is having a clean and safe and vital environment to encourage all of Anchorage, South, Midtown, and all East and West to come to downtown as a walking district. And I would venture to say that office employees of all of our district, both new, proposed, and existing stakeholders, benefit from this ambiance of clean, safe, and vital. Because where else can you go in Anchorage to walk from your office building to the middle of downtown Anchorage, 4th, 5th, 6th Avenue, and have all these restaurateurs and not be harassed by panhandlers and stumbling over drunks? We've changed a lot of what downtown used to be. And I think that has a value. Now, whether you want to attribute 5% of your building rental value to this or 90% of it, there's an attributed value, but I agree, it's difficult to quantify.
Thank you, Ben. Harriet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for coming to speak to us. I have to respond to your most recent question, and the other place where you can walk to all these great places to eat is Spenard. It's my neighborhood.
Fair enough.
I rarely have to leave, except maybe to go to Costco, and that's about a 4-mile drive. And I couldn't walk that anyway because of the amount of stuff that I buy. But in any case, some of the comments we've gotten from constituents include several folks who are within this service area who are making the observation that governments, churches, and so on that are located within this district, nonprofits, charitable and education organizations are not necessarily paying taxes. My assumption is that if it's a government agency that is leasing space, they are paying through their lease. That's correct?
I'm not sure how the exemptions are dealt out to the landlords or their associated tenancy. I do know there is an exemption, for instance, for the state of Alaska in their buildings. The GSA also has exemptions for their buildings. But as for other nonprofits, I am not certain how your ordinance is written. Maybe we can have somebody on staff to speak to that. I guess what I would comment is that most of the nonprofits, the GSA, the city, all contribute a fee in lieu of a tax assessment. So in that regard, we are having quite a bit of nonprofit participation, even though they are not legally responsible for paying one. But as for your specific answer to the question, I'd have to defer to technical expertise off staff.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask of staff. Thanks.
Mr. Wong, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And it was really nice to see this project work the way it was supposed to. Because I was on the body vac when this came in front of us.
Good. A little history is helpful.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. State your name for the record, please. Spell your last name.
My name is Steve Ribuffo, R-I-B-U-F-F-O. And thank you very much for the opportunity to come speak tonight, and I guess I'm the only thing that stands between you and adjournment. So I'll be as brief as I can. I've been a member of the Anchorage Downtown Partnership Board for just under a year right now, but I'm going to put the Deputy Port Director hat on to talk to you tonight because I've had the opportunity to speak with passengers from 9 cruise ships that have come to Anchorage this year for the very first time. And I've got the opportunity to ride the shuttle buses back and forth in town with these folks, and also to stand on the bull rail in the evening as they're getting ready to leave, and as the passengers come out and line the railings on the Lido deck. And it's always fun to ask them how their visit to Anchorage was. And I got to tell you, the hundreds of people that I got the chance to talk to, there was just one single theme that ran through just about every comment that everybody had to make, and it was, well, not only are the people awful nice, but you have got one of the cleanest cities we have ever seen. And it doesn't come easy to see that happen. And Chris Schutte and company have a great group of people who dedicate a lot of time to making that happen, to keeping downtown clean and safe. And there's absolutely no reason why it's a bad idea to not only approve the levy for this year, but to extend the size of the district to include the west side. There's lots of good that can be gained from that, and I hope you vote your support for it.
We have some questions. Mr. Honeman, sir.
Yeah, actually, question, but you reminded me of a comment, Mr. Buford. Thanks for coming down and testifying. You tweaked something in my mind. Not too long ago back, I stopped in the city of Philadelphia. What is it? City of Brotherly Love or something like that. I felt, as I walked out of my hotel, walking with my suitcase in hand, trying to catch their transit system, which was below ground, and I had to stop off at a little store. But you brought up a point. Pretty wide sidewalks, a lot of businesses up and down, are very narrow streets, and if you've been in some of those cities and streets in Philadelphia, you can talk how narrow, probably testify how narrow they really are. But when I got out there carrying my bag, and you know, I've been a cop for many years and had been, and pretty tall guy myself, but I felt for a moment, just for a few moments, I looked around, and boy, was I way out of my element, and I had to go into this store, and I was worried about my belongings. And lo and behold, this nice lady in some clothing, a jacket, identifiable, walked up, and she literally was something to do with like a security ambassador. And I asked her specifically where was the nearest store, could I get an ATM, and where could I catch that little train out to the airport. And that lady actually followed me, walked alongside me, and explained along the way, you know, let's not miss your train so you can catch the plane. And showed me and pointed to different places. And I asked her for a card, and I remiss a little because I meant to track that card down and get a hold of ADP and recommend something along that way. This lady was a courtesy ambassador and actually made me feel comfortable, a little safer in their city, and pointed out some areas. So I'm with you. I think that our tourists deserve to see a good, well-maintained downtown area, because that's likely where they're going to spend a lot of their time, and I might say money. and I do believe everybody benefits from that, including the office buildings that are down there. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm a kid from New York City, and I don't have a story like this to share with you.
There are no other questions, sir. Thank you for coming forward. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Keep in mind, we will continue this public hearing to the 28th. Anyone at all? Seeing no one, I need a motion to continue the public hearing on both items 14L and 14M.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any objection? Not seeing any of these items will be back in front of us on 9/28. Both 14L and 14M. AR 2010-251 and AO 2010-58. We're now down at the end of the agenda. There are no special orders that I know of. Assembly comments. Debbie, we'll start on your end tonight, ma'am. Mike?
I'll spare you, not tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Paul?
I was just tempted for a moment, Mr. Chairman, that if we could pass a resolution asking Mother Nature for another month of the sunny weather we had this past weekend. I'm not sure she'd listen, so I pass.
Ernie?
No comment.
Pat?
For those who will be there, we'll see you tomorrow. For everybody else, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Jennifer? Elby?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chris?
Good night.
Harriet?
No, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're now down to individuals that want to speak on something that's not on the agenda. Is there anybody else that wants to address the Assembly on anything for 3 minutes? I'm not seeing anything. I need a motion to adjourn. Second, we're adjourned.